When a mountain blizzard buried a luxury SUV with a powerful CEO inside, nobody expected her savior would be a widowed snowplow mechanic with calloused hands and a broken heart. What started as a simple rescue in the frozen wilderness became something neither of them could walk away from. A collision of two worlds that would change everything. This is their story. Stay until the end to see how love found them in the coldest place on Earth, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story has traveled. The mountain had no mercy. Caleb Foster had learned that truth the hard way, carved into his bones through 3 brutal winters working the high passes of the Colorado Rockies. But tonight the mountain was angrier than he'd ever seen it. The wind didn't just howl, it screamed, tearing across the highway like something alive and vengeful, whipping snow into a horizontal wall of white that devoured everything in its path. His truck, a battered '09 Ford with 200,000 miles and a prayer holding it together, shuddered against each gust. The wipers fought a losing battle against the ice coating his windshield. Caleb leaned forward, squinting through the narrow arc of visibility, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Come on, girl," he muttered to the truck, his voice rough from disuse. "Just a few more miles." The radio crackled with static, then a voice broke through. "All residents advised to shelter in place immediately. Interstate 70 is officially closed. Repeat, I-70 is closed. Emergency services are suspended until—" Caleb reached over and switched it off. He didn't need a weatherman to tell him it was bad. He could feel it in the way the truck fishtailed on black ice, in the way the snow had already buried the yellow highway markers, in the terrible silence between wind gusts when the world seemed to hold its breath before the next assault. He shouldn't be out here. He knew that. But Tommy Richardson's furnace had died, and Tommy was 73 with emphysema, and there was no way Caleb was leaving the old man to freeze while he waited for the storm to pass. So he'd grabbed his tools, fired up the truck, and headed into the teeth of the blizzard. The furnace was running now. Tommy was safe, and Caleb was trying like hell to get home before the storm turned from dangerous to deadly. Home. The word still felt strange, even after 4 years. The cabin he'd shared with Sarah, warm, bright Sarah, with her laugh like summer rain, now felt more like a mausoleum than a home. But it was warm and dry, and his daughter Emma was there with her grandmother, probably curled up on the couch with hot chocolate and that book about dragons she'd read 17 times. The thought of Emma made his chest tight. 9 years old, and she'd already lost so much. Lost her mother to cancer, watched her father retreat into himself, learned to be quiet and careful around his grief. She deserved better. She deserved a father who could do more than just survive, who could actually live again. "Tomorrow," he promised the darkness. "Tomorrow, I'll do better." The words were swallowed by another gust of wind that rocked the truck sideways. Caleb corrected, felt the tires slip, corrected again. The temperature gauge was dropping, 12 degrees now, heading toward single digits. Wind chill had to be somewhere around -30. At that temperature, exposed skin froze in minutes. At that temperature, mistakes became fatal. He was debating whether to pull over and wait it out when he saw them. Twin red lights flickering through the white chaos. Taillights. A vehicle, stopped on the highway. Or not stopped. Wrecked. Caleb's pulse kicked up as he eased off the gas, letting the truck slow naturally on the ice. The red lights grew clearer, and then he saw the full picture. A black SUV, expensive luxury model, canted at a 45-degree angle, half in the ditch, half on the highway. Snow was already drifting against the passenger side, threatening to bury it completely. He pulled up behind it, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the sudden quiet. Every instinct screamed at him to drive past, to get home, to not add another risk to an already dangerous night. But even as he thought it, he was reaching for his parka, pulling on his heavy gloves, wrapping the wool scarf Sarah had knit him around his face. Everyone deserves to get home. The words were automatic, a mantra he'd adopted from his father, who'd worked search and rescue in these same mountains for 30 years. How many times had Caleb heard him say it? How many times had he watched his father head into storms just like this one because someone needed help? The cold hit him like a physical blow when he opened the door. The wind tried to rip it from his hands, and snow immediately found every gap in his clothing, stinging his cheeks, watering his eyes. He bent into it, using his body weight to force the door closed, then started toward the SUV. Each step was a battle. The snow was knee-deep and getting deeper, the wind trying to push him sideways off the road. He could barely see 3 feet in front of him. The taillights were his only guide, 2 red beacons in an ocean of white. When he reached the driver's side door, his heart sank. The window was starred with cracks, and there was someone slumped against it, a silhouette barely visible through the ice and snow coating the glass. He tried the handle. Locked. "Hey!" He pounded on the window with his fist. "Can you hear me?" No response. The figure didn't move. Caleb's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Unconscious, hypothermic. Worse. He looked around for something to break the glass with and spotted a rock jutting from the snowdrift. He grabbed it, hefted it, then paused. The woman, he could see now it was a woman, was right against the glass. If he broke it, he might hurt her. But if he didn't, she was going to die out here. He moved to the passenger side, fighting his way through the deeper snow, and tried that door. Also locked. He could see her better from this angle. Dark hair, pale skin, wearing what looked like a dress. A dress. In a Colorado blizzard. Either she'd been caught unprepared or she was from somewhere that didn't have winter. Either way, she was in serious trouble. Caleb raised the rock, aimed for the corner of the passenger window where it would be farthest from her head, and brought it down hard. The glass held. He hit it again, putting his shoulder into it. On the third strike, it shattered, collapsing inward in a cascade of safety glass cubes. The wind immediately howled through the opening, filling the SUV's interior with snow. Caleb reached through, feeling for the unlock button, found it, pressed it. The locks chunked open. He yanked the rear door open and climbed in, pulling the door shut behind him. The sudden absence of wind was startling. His ears rang in the relative quiet. He could hear his own breathing, harsh and quick, and under it, there, another sound. Shallow, rapid breathing. She was alive. "Ma'am?" He leaned forward between the seats. "Can you hear me?" Up close, he could see more details. She was young, 30s maybe, with an oval face and high cheekbones. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that had probably been elegant before the crash, and she was wearing a crimson dress that looked like it cost more than his truck. Blood traced a thin line from her temple down her cheek, stark against her pale skin. Her eyes fluttered open. They were gray, storm cloud gray, and completely unfocused. "Cold," she whispered. Her lips were tinged blue. "I know. I'm going to get you out of here." Caleb assessed the situation quickly. The airbag had deployed, then deflated. Her seatbelt was still fastened. The driver's side door was crumpled from impact. She must have hit something, maybe went into a skid and sideswiped a guardrail or rock face. No way that door was opening. He reached over and unclicked her seatbelt, then carefully turned her toward him, checking for obvious injuries as he moved her. She gasped in pain when he touched her left arm, possible fracture or severe bruising, but nothing seemed life-threatening. The head wound was bleeding but not gushing. Concussion, definitely. Maybe worse. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep her talking, keep her conscious. "Ava." The word was barely audible. "Ava Sinclair." "Okay, Ava, I'm Caleb. We need to get you out of here. The storm is only getting worse." She nodded, a tiny movement that made her wince. "My phone. I need my phone. I need to call." "No cell service up here in this weather," Caleb cut her off gently. "And we don't have time. Can you move? Can you walk?" I think so." But when he helped her turn in the seat, she cried out and nearly passed out. Her left leg buckled when she tried to put weight on it. Sprained ankle, maybe broken. Combined with the possible arm injury and the concussion, there was no way she was walking anywhere. Caleb made a decision. "I'm going to carry you. Put your good arm around my neck. I can—" "You can't," he said firmly. "And we're out of time. Trust me." Maybe it was the authority in his voice, or maybe she was too weak to argue, but she complied. Her arm went around his neck, light as a bird's wing. She weighed nothing, or maybe the adrenaline coursing through him made her feel that way. He maneuvered her out of the car awkwardly, trying not to bang her injured arm or leg against the doorframe. The moment they emerged from the SUV, the wind tried to rip her from his arms. Snow pelted them like tiny bullets. Ava buried her face against his shoulder with a small sound of fear. "Hold on tight," Caleb shouted over the wind. Don't let go, no matter what. He felt her grip tighten fractionally. Then he turned toward his truck and started walking. It was only 50 feet. It might as well have been 50 miles. Each step was a calculated risk on the ice underneath the snow. Fall, and they'd both be in trouble. The wind pushed and pulled, trying to knock them down. His arms burned with Ava's weight, his legs screaming as he forced them to lift, push forward, lift again. Snow found its way down his collar, under his gloves, into his boots. He couldn't feel his face anymore. Everyone deserves to get home. 20 feet, 30. He could see his truck now, a darker shadow in the white. Almost there. A gust of wind slammed into them like a fist. Caleb staggered, his boots skidding on ice. For a terrifying moment, they were going down. He twisted, taking the impact on his shoulder instead of on Ava, and somehow kept his feet. Pain lanced up his arm. He ignored it. 10 feet. 5. He got the door open one-handed, practically fell into the truck with Ava still in his arms. She was shaking uncontrollably now, her teeth chattering so hard he could hear them clicking. Hypothermia setting in fast. He laid her across the bench seat, cranked the heat to maximum, and grabbed the emergency blanket from behind the seat. It was one of those silver space blankets, thin but effective. He wrapped it around her, then added his own parka on top. She needed to get warm, and fast. Keys, she mumbled. My keys, I need. We'll worry about your car later, Caleb said. He was already turning the ignition, praying the truck would start. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught with a roar. The heater immediately began blasting cold air that would warm up in a few minutes. Ava tried to sit up. My briefcase. There are documents. Important. Your life is more important than documents, Caleb said flatly. He put the truck in gear, feeling the tires search for purchase on the ice. Hold on. The drive that followed was a nightmare carved from ice and wind and darkness. The highway was completely unrecognizable now, just a vague path between snowbanks that might have been trees or rocks or cliffs. Caleb drove on instinct and memory, following the contours of the land he'd traveled 1,000 times. Beside him, Ava drifted in and out of consciousness. When she was lucid, she asked questions in that precise, controlled voice that suggested she was used to getting answers. Where were they going? How long would it take? Was he sure he knew where he was going? When she wasn't lucid, she said other things. Fragments of sentences about meetings and contracts and someone named Marcus who would be furious. Once she said a name, David, with such longing that Caleb felt like an intruder in a private grief. Who's David? He asked, partly to keep her talking, partly because he wanted to know if there was someone out there worrying about her. Was, she corrected softly. Who David was? My brother. He died in a car accident 3 years ago. But she was quiet for a moment. Also in winter. Also in the mountains. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But something in his chest tightened. He understood loss. Understood how it carved you hollow and filled the emptiness with fear. The wind was getting worse. Visibility was down to maybe 5 feet. Caleb was navigating by feel now, by the faint impressions of where the road should be. They should have been at the turnoff to his access road by now. Had he missed it? Gone too far? Then his headlights caught it. The old pine tree split by lightning, its distinctive Y shape unmistakable. Relief flooded through him. 1/2 mile more. They were going to make it. The access road was barely passable. Drifts had formed across it, and twice the truck bogged down, and he had to rock it back and forth, reverse and forward to break through. But his cabin sat on higher ground, and the wind here created bare patches as often as it created drifts. When the cabin finally came into view, a dark square against the white, Caleb felt something in his chest unclench. Home. They'd made it home. He pulled as close to the front door as he could, killed the engine, and turned to Ava. We're here. I'm going to carry you inside, get you warm, then assess your injuries properly. Okay? She nodded weakly. The space blanket and parka had helped, but she was still shaking, still pale, still in danger. The cold was a shock all over again when he stepped out. He'd gotten used to the truck's warmth. He went around to the passenger side, gathered Ava into his arms, easier this time, now that he didn't have to lift her from an awkward angle, and carried her to the door. The porch light was off. Power must be out. Not surprising in this weather, but he had backup. A generator in the shed, kerosene lamps, a wood stove that could heat the whole place. He'd prepared for this. He kicked the door open, never locked it. What was the point out here? And stepped into the darkness of his home. Lights, Ava mumbled against his chest. Power's out, he explained, carrying her to the couch. I'll get the lamps going in a minute. He laid her on the old leather couch, Sarah's favorite piece of furniture, the one thing he couldn't bring himself to replace, and tucked the space blanket more tightly around her. Then he felt his way to the kitchen, found the drawer where he kept the matches, and lit the kerosene lamp on the counter. Warm yellow light bloomed, pushing back the darkness. He lit 2 more lamps, carrying them into the living room, and for the first time got a clear look at his unexpected guest. She was beautiful. Even battered and pale and shaking with cold, there was something striking about her. Not just her features, though those were fine enough, but something in the way she held herself. Even now, injured and vulnerable, there was a core of steel in her. This was a woman used to being in control, and right now, she had none. How do you feel? He asked, kneeling beside the couch. Like I got hit by a truck, she said, attempting a smile. It didn't quite work. What happened? I remember driving, and then the car started to slide, and then she trailed off, confused. You crashed, Caleb said simply. Lost control on the ice, probably. You're lucky you didn't go over the edge. Some of those drop-offs are 100 feet or more. She absorbed this information with a small nod, then looked around the cabin. He saw her taking it in, the rough wood walls, the simple furniture, the framed photos on the mantel. Her gaze lingered on the picture of Sarah and Emma, then moved to him. Where am I? About 15 miles east of Copper Creek. This is my cabin. I'm a snowplow mechanic, work for the county highway department. Was coming back from a repair job when I found you. 15 miles from... She seemed to be trying to orient herself. I was heading to Denver, from a resort in Aspen. I had a meeting. She stopped, closed her eyes. My team. They'll be looking for me. I need to contact them. Not tonight, Caleb said. No cell service, no landline, and even if we had one, the lines are down. This storm is a beast. Search and rescue won't be able to get out until it clears. He watched panic flicker across her face, quickly suppressed. This was someone who lived by schedules and plans, by control and communication. Being cut off from her world was probably as frightening as the crash itself. How long? She asked. Could be a few hours, could be a couple days. Hard to say with these mountain storms. He stood, moved toward the wood stove. Right now, we need to focus on getting you warm and treating your injuries. He set about building a fire, his hands moving through the familiar motions without thought. Crumple newspaper, lay kindling in a pyramid, add larger pieces of split wood. Strike match, light the paper, wait for it to catch. The smell of smoke and burning wood filled the cabin, earthy and primal and somehow comforting. While the fire built, he filled a kettle with water and set it on top of the stove to heat. Then he pulled down his first aid kit, a tackle box repurposed and stocked with everything from bandages to a SAM splint. Let's look at that head first, he said, returning to the couch. Ava sat up slightly, wincing. Up close, the cut on her temple looked worse. A gash maybe an inch long, still seeping blood. He cleaned it gently with sterile gauze soaked in clean water, checking for debris. She held perfectly still, not making a sound, though he knew it had to hurt. You're going to have a hell of a headache, he said, applying antibiotic ointment and then a butterfly bandage to hold the edges together. Probably concussed. I'll need to wake you every couple hours tonight to check on you. I'm fine, she protested automatically. I've had worse. In your line of work? He moved to her arm, carefully rolling up the sleeve of her dress. What do you do? I'm a CEO, Sinclair Technologies. We manufacture. She paused, her face going tight as he probed her forearm. Advanced sensor systems and AI integration platforms. Caleb had no idea what that meant, but he nodded as if he did. Her arm was badly bruised, but nothing felt broken. He wrapped it carefully with an elastic bandage for support. And what's a CEO doing driving alone through a Colorado blizzard in a cocktail dress? It's not a cocktail dress. It's a business dinner dress. There's a difference. She said it primly, and he hid a smile. Even half frozen and injured, she had pride. I was at a charity gala in Aspen. Major donors, potential investors. I left early to make an evening flight from Denver. Obviously, I didn't make it. Obviously. He moved to her ankle next, carefully removing her shoe, an expensive high heel completely unsuited for winter. Her ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. He felt it carefully, watching her face. She went pale and bit her lip, but didn't cry out. Just a bad sprain, I think, not broken, but you won't be walking on it for a while. He wrapped it snugly, then sat back on his heels. That's the best I can do for now. You should get out of that dress and into something dry. I have some clothes that might... I'm fine in this, she cut him off. But her shaking betrayed her. The dress was silk, soaked through from snow, offering no warmth. You'll get hypothermia, Caleb said flatly. Your core temperature has already dropped. You need dry clothes and you need them now. They stared at each other, a battle of wills. She was used to being in charge, he realized. Used to making decisions and having them followed. But this wasn't her boardroom. This was survival. I'll get you something, he said, standing. You can change behind that screen over there. He went to his bedroom, hadn't been able to bring himself to sort through Sarah's things, so her clothes still hung in the closet next to his, and pulled out sweatpants, a flannel shirt, wool socks. Sarah had been taller than Ava, but it would be close enough. When he returned, Ava was trying to stand, using the couch arm for support. Her injured ankle gave out immediately, and she would have fallen if he hadn't crossed the room in 3 quick strides and caught her. Stubborn, he muttered. Independent, she corrected, but she was breathing hard, clearly in pain. There's a difference. Not always. He helped her behind the standing screen, a relic from when the cabin had been his grandfather's. Call if you need help. I won't. But 2 minutes later, he heard a frustrated sound, and she said, The zipper. On the dress. I can't reach it. Caleb moved to the screen's edge, keeping his eyes averted. Which side? Left. He reached around blindly, found the zipper, drew it down. His knuckles brushed her back, skin cold as marble. She shivered, and he quickly pulled his hand away. Thank you, she said quietly. He returned to the fire, adding more wood, trying not to think about the woman behind the screen, trying not to wonder about her life in a world so different from his. CEO, charity galas, evening flights. It might as well be another planet. The wind howled around the cabin, making the walls creak. Snow rattled against the windows like thrown sand. This storm was settling in for the long haul. You said earlier, Ava's voice came from behind the screen, that everyone deserves to get home. Is that a personal motto? Caleb was quiet for a moment, watching flames dance behind the stove's glass door. My father's, actually. He worked search and rescue in these mountains for 30 years. Lost count of how many people he pulled out of wrecks, avalanches, falls. Every time someone questioned why he'd risk his life for a stranger, that's what he'd say. Everyone deserves to get home. Is he still in rescue? No, he died 5 years ago, heart attack on a training run. Caleb smiled without humor. Spent his whole life in dangerous situations, and it was his own body that did him in. I'm sorry. The words were simple but felt genuine. Caleb nodded, then realized she couldn't see him. Thank you. Ava emerged from behind the screen wearing his wife's clothes. They hung on her, sweatpants bunched at the ankles, flannel shirt drowning her frame. But she looked warmer, more human, less like a corporate ice queen and more like a woman who'd just survived something terrifying. She limped to the couch, refusing his help, and settled back with a barely suppressed groan. Your wife's clothes? She guessed. Yeah? He didn't elaborate. Didn't want to talk about Sarah, didn't want to explain the empty space she'd left behind. I'll make soup. You need to eat something. Get your strength back. The kettle was boiling now. He pulled out canned soup, chicken noodle, the kind his daughter liked, and poured it into 2 mugs. Not fancy, but it was hot, and it was food. He carried them both to the living room, handed one to Ava. She wrapped her hands around it, absorbing the warmth, and took a careful sip. This is good. It was the kind of polite thing people said even when food wasn't good, but Caleb let it slide. He sat in the armchair across from her, his chair, worn to the shape of his body from countless evenings, and drank his own soup in silence. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the fire crackled and the lamps cast dancing shadows. Two strangers thrown together by chance and circumstance, separated by worlds but trapped in the same small space. Ava broke the silence first. "You live here alone?" "With my daughter, Emma. She's 9. She's with her grandmother tonight in town, Sarah's mother. I was supposed to pick her up tomorrow, but..." He gestured at the windows, where snow was already piling against the glass. "That's not happening." "Your wife?" "Died 4 years ago. Cancer." The words came easier now, worn smooth by repetition. Like a stone in his pocket he'd carried so long he sometimes forgot it was there. "I'm so sorry, Caleb." Ava's voice was soft. I can't imagine." "You learn to carry it," he said simply. "Not much choice." They fell silent again. Caleb found himself studying her over the rim of his mug. She was different now, out of that dress, in regular clothes. The armor had come off. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the pain she was trying to hide, the fear underneath it all. "What about you?" he asked. "No one waiting at home? Worried about you?" Ava's expression shuddered. "My assistant knows I was heading to Denver. When I don't arrive and don't call, she'll worry. But I live alone. My parents are in Florida. No siblings anymore, as I mentioned." She paused. "There's no one waiting." The way she said it, clinical, matter-of-fact, made it sound like a choice. But Caleb heard something else underneath. Loneliness. The same loneliness he carried. "Well," he said, "you're safe here. We'll get through the storm, and then we'll figure out how to get you back to your life." "And if the storm doesn't end?" "It will. They always do." But even as he said it, the wind picked up, slamming against the cabin hard enough to rattle the windows. Snow found its way through invisible cracks, creating tiny drifts on the sills. The temperature was still dropping. He could feel it in the way the cold crept through gaps in the walls, in the way frost formed on the inside of the windows. This wasn't just a storm. This was something else. Something worse. Ava must have seen something in his face because she asked, "What's wrong?" Caleb considered lying, then decided she deserved the truth. "The storm is worse than I thought. The way it's settling in, the temperature drop. We could be looking at a genuine blizzard, the kind that lasts days and buries everything." "Days?" She sat up straighter, alarm flickering across her face. "But I have meetings, a board presentation on Tuesday, a product launch. None of that matters if you're dead," Caleb said bluntly. "Right now we focus on staying warm, staying fed, and staying alive. Everything else is just noise." She looked like she wanted to argue, but another massive gust of wind hit the cabin, and something outside, maybe a tree branch, maybe something else, crashed with a sound like a gunshot. Ava flinched, and Caleb saw her recognize the truth. They were at the mercy of forces far beyond corporate control or personal will. "How much food do you have?" she asked. "Enough. I keep the cabin stocked, and the generator's full of gas. We'll be okay." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." He finished his soup and stood. "You should rest. Take the couch. It's closer to the fire. I'll take the chair." "I can't take your..." "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "You're injured and in shock. You need real rest. I'll be fine." For once, she didn't fight him. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she recognized that her usual methods, negotiation, persuasion, command, didn't work here. She lay back, pulling the space blanket and his parka over her like a nest. Caleb settled into his chair, pulling a quilt over his legs. The fire was warm, the cabin secure. They had shelter, food, water. They would survive this. But as he watched Ava's breathing slow into sleep, as the storm continued its assault on the walls, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that rescuing this woman from her wrecked car had been the easy part. The hard part, keeping her alive, keeping them both alive through whatever the mountain threw at them next, was just beginning. Caleb woke to darkness and cold that bit through the quilt like teeth. The fire in the stove had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see by. He checked his watch, 3:17 in the morning. He'd been asleep for maybe 2 hours. The wind had changed pitch, no longer howling but moaning, a low sustained note that made the cabin feel like it was breathing. Snow had piled against the windows, blocking out what little moonlight might have filtered through the clouds. The world outside had ceased to exist, reduced to nothing but white and wind and cold. He stood, joints protesting, and moved to the stove, added wood from the stack beside it, stirred the embers until flames caught and began to climb. Warmth bloomed outward slowly, grudgingly. The temperature inside the cabin had dropped into the 40s, much colder, and they'd be in real trouble. His eyes went to the couch, to the shape of Ava beneath the layers of blankets. He could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. Not good. He crossed to her, touched her forehead. Still too cold. Her skin felt clammy, and when he checked her pulse, it was rapid and thready. "Ava," he said quietly, shaking her shoulder. "Ava, wake up." She stirred, mumbled something incoherent. Her eyes opened but didn't focus. The concussion, combined with the cold and exhaustion, was pulling her under. He needed to keep her conscious, keep her engaged. "Come on," he said, sliding an arm under her shoulders. "Sit up for me." "Tired," she protested weakly. "I know, but I need you to wake up. Need to make sure you're okay." He got her upright, propped against the couch arm. Her head lolled, and he steadied it with his hand. "Ava, look at me." Her eyes found his, swimming with confusion. "Where? You're in my cabin. You were in a car accident, remember?" She blinked slowly, processing. "The storm. Yes, I remember." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "What time is it?" "After 3. How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a mountain." She tried for humor, but it came out flat. "Headache. Everything hurts." "That's normal. What's your full name?" "Ava Catherine Sinclair." "Where do you live?" "Denver, Cherry Creek." She frowned. "Why are you asking me this?" "Concussion protocol, making sure you're tracking okay." He stood, moved to the kitchen, poured water into a pot, and set it on the stove. "I'm making tea, something hot to drink." "I don't drink tea." "You do tonight." He found the box of chamomile Sarah used to drink, measured leaves into 2 cups. Waited for the water to heat, watching Ava from the corner of his eye. She was looking around the cabin now, taking in details she'd been too disoriented to notice before. Her gaze lingered on the photographs on the mantel. "Your wife was beautiful." Caleb followed her line of sight to the picture of Sarah, laughing, her hair catching sunlight, Emma, as a toddler, in her arms. It had been taken at the county fair 6 months before the diagnosis, before everything changed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She was. How did you two meet?" He poured hot water over the tea leaves, considering whether he wanted to answer. But there was something about the hour, the isolation, the strangeness of having a stranger in his home that made him willing to share what he normally kept locked away. "High school," he said, bringing the cups over. "She was the new girl, moved here from California. Hated the cold, hated the snow, swore she'd leave the minute she graduated." He handed Ava a cup, then settled back in his chair. "We started dating senior year. Everyone said it wouldn't last, including Sarah's parents. But it did. 13 years. We got married young, too young, everyone said. I was working at the county garage. She was taking online classes to finish her teaching degree. We were broke and happy." He sipped his tea, tasting memories as much as chamomile. "Emma came along when we were 23. Unplanned, but wanted. Sarah got a job at the elementary school. We bought this cabin for nothing because it was falling apart, spent 5 years fixing it up ourselves." "It sounds perfect," Ava said softly. "It was. Until it wasn't." Caleb stared into his cup. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, there was nothing to do but wait. She lasted 8 months. Died in that bedroom right there. He gestured toward the closed door behind him. Emma was 5. Old enough to understand her mother was sick. Too young to understand she wasn't coming back. The wind moaned around the cabin, filling the silence that followed. Ava cradled her cup in both hands, and when she spoke, her voice was rough with emotion. "My brother David was 29 when he died. Car accident on Vail Pass. Black ice, just like what I hit tonight. He was brilliant, double doctorate, published researcher, The kind of person who made everyone around him smarter just by being in the room. She paused. He was also my business partner. We founded Sinclair Technologies together. After he died, I threw myself into work, built the company into what it is today, told myself it was honoring his memory. But really, she trailed off, looking away. Really, you were running, Caleb finished quietly. Her eyes snapped to his, startled. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, running, because if I stopped, if I let myself feel it. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I get it, Caleb said. After Sarah died, I did the same thing. Worked 70, 80-hour weeks. Took every emergency call, every overtime shift. Told myself Emma was better off with her grandmother, that I was providing for her. Truth was, I couldn't stand to be in this cabin without Sarah. Couldn't stand to see Emma's face and see Sarah looking back at me. He set his cup down. Took me 2 years to realize I was abandoning Emma just like Sarah had been taken from her. That she'd lost both parents, not just one. What changed? Emma's teacher called me. Said Emma was acting out, falling behind in school. Asked if everything was okay at home. He rubbed his face, remembering the shame of that conversation. I didn't even know, hadn't been paying attention, so I cut my hours, started coming home, started being a father instead of just a provider. We're still figuring it out, but at least now I'm present for it. Ava was quiet for a long moment, then said, I don't have anyone to call me. No one to tell me I'm getting it wrong. Maybe that's not true. Maybe you're just not listening. She looked at him sharply, then away. Touched a nerve, he thought. Good. Sometimes nerves needed touching. The fire crackled, settling into itself. Outside, something metallic banged repeatedly, probably the wind catching the shed door. Caleb made a mental note to check it when he could, though in this weather that might not be until morning, or later. Tell me about your daughter, Ava said, clearly wanting to change the subject. Emma? Caleb felt his expression soften the way it always did when he thought about his daughter. She's 9 going on 40, smart as hell, loves to read, wants to be a veterinarian or an astronaut, or maybe both. She hasn't decided yet. She's got Sarah's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a dangerous combination. He smiled. She's the best thing I ever did, the only thing I got completely right. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She saved me in a lot of ways. Gave me a reason to keep going when I wanted to give up. He stood, checked the fire again, added another log. The cabin was warming up slowly. What about you? No desire for kids? I'm married to my work, Ava said automatically, then seemed to hear how that sounded. That's what I always say. The truth is more complicated. I'm 36, single. My last relationship ended 3 years ago because he couldn't deal with my schedule, my ambition, said I cared more about quarterly earnings than I did about him. She laughed without humor. He wasn't wrong. Was he worth caring about? The question seemed to surprise her. She considered it, head tilted. No, she admitted. Probably not. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is, I'm incapable of putting anything ahead of work. I've optimized myself into isolation. Optimized, Caleb repeated. That's a business word. Everything's a business word in my world. Optimize, leverage, synergize, maximize shareholder value. She said it with a hint of bitterness. Sometimes I don't know if I'm running a company or being run by it. So quit. Just like that? Quit? Why not? If it's making you miserable, if it's cost you everything else, why keep doing it? Ava stared at him like he'd suggested she sprout wings and fly. Because it's my company, my life's work, David's legacy. Because 500 people depend on me for their jobs. Because we're doing important work. Our sensors are used in autonomous vehicles, in medical devices, in aerospace applications. What we do matters. And you matter too, Caleb said quietly, but I'm guessing no one's told you that in a while. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, looked away. In the lamplight, he could see her blinking rapidly, fighting tears she clearly had no intention of shedding in front of him. Sorry, he said, overstepped. No. Her voice was rough. No, you're right. I'm not used to people talking to me like that. Everyone in my life either wants something from me or works for me. No one tells me what I need to hear. Well, I don't want anything, and I definitely don't work for you, so I guess that makes me uniquely qualified. He offered a small smile. For whatever that's worth. She smiled back, tentative, but real. It's worth more than you know. They fell into a comfortable silence, sipping their tea, listening to the storm. Caleb found himself studying her again. The elegant line of her neck, the way she held her cup like it was fine china instead of a chipped mug, the intelligence in her eyes even dulled by pain and exhaustion. She was so far outside his experience, this woman. Might as well be from another planet. Yet here they were, two damaged people thrown together by chance, sharing truths in the dark. You should try to sleep again, he said eventually. It's going to be a long day when the sun comes up, if it comes up. What do you mean, if? Sometimes these storms are so thick you can't see the sun even at noon. Everything just stays gray. He took her empty cup, set both in the sink to wash later. But we'll be okay. I promise. You can't promise that, Ava said. But she was already lying back down, pulling the blankets up. No one can promise that. Watch me. He settled into his chair, wrapped the quilt around himself. Get some rest. He thought she might argue more, but exhaustion won. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Caleb stayed awake, watching the fire, listening to the wind, thinking about the strange turn his night had taken. He'd woken up yesterday morning with a simple plan. Fix Tommy's furnace, get home, spend the evening working on Emma's birthday present, a wooden jewelry box he was carving. Instead, he'd driven into a blizzard and pulled a CEO from a wrecked SUV, and now she was sleeping on his couch, wearing his dead wife's clothes while the worst storm in years tried to tear his cabin apart. Life was funny that way. Made plans and laughed when you tried to follow them. The hours crawled past. Caleb dozed in fits and starts, waking every 30 minutes or so to check the fire, to check on Ava, to listen to the storm's progress. Around 5, he gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee using the pot on the stove. The familiar ritual was grounding, measure grounds, add water, wait for it to percolate. The smell filled the cabin, rich and dark. He was on his second cup when Ava stirred, blinked awake. Gray morning light, dim and reluctant, filtered through the snow-covered windows. She sat up slowly, wincing. Morning, Caleb said. Coffee? God, yes. She pushed hair out of her face, looking rumpled and more human than she had last night. What time is it? Little after 6. He poured her a cup, brought it over. How's the head? Pounding. The ankle's worse. She accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaled the steam. Thank you. For this. For everything. Just doing what anyone would do. No, she said firmly. Not anyone. Most people would have driven past, especially in weather like this. You risked your life to help a stranger. Caleb shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Everyone deserves to get home, remember? But I didn't get home. I got here instead. She looked around the cabin again, and something in her expression had shifted. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Before Caleb could respond, a tremendous crack echoed through the cabin. The whole structure shuddered. Ava's eyes went wide with fear. What was that? Caleb was already moving to the window, brushing snow away from the glass to peer out. What he saw made his stomach drop. A massive pine tree, one of the tall ones that stood sentinel on the north side of the property, had split under the weight of snow and ice. The top half had fallen, missing the cabin by maybe 10 feet, but taking out the power line that ran to the generator shed. Sparks flickered briefly in the gray morning before dying out. Damn, he breathed. What is it? Tree came down. Took out the line to the generator. He turned back to her, calculating. We're okay for now. Stove provides heat. We have kerosene lamps for light. But without the generator, we can't pump water from the well. How much water do we have? Couple gallons in jugs. Maybe another gallon in the kettle and pots. Enough for drinking, cooking, cleaning injuries. But that's it until I can fix the line. He looked out at the storm, which showed no signs of abating. And I can't fix it in this weather. Ava absorbed this with a nod, and he saw her shifting into problem-solving mode. Okay, so we ration water, prioritize uses, and wait for the storm to clear. That's the plan. What else could go wrong? Caleb didn't answer that. In his experience, asking what else could go wrong was the surest way to find out. The morning passed slowly. Caleb made breakfast, oatmeal cooked on the stove, sweetened with honey and dried cranberries. Ava ate mechanically, staring at nothing. He recognized the look, the mental distance that came from being forcibly disconnected from your normal life. She was probably thinking about all the things she was missing, all the people trying to reach her, all the chaos her absence was creating. "They'll manage," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "What?" "Your company, your assistant, whatever crisis you're worried about. They'll manage without you for a few days." "You don't know that." "Sure I do. You wouldn't have hired people who fall apart the second you're not there. That'd be bad business." He took her empty bowl, set it aside. "Give them some credit." "It's not about credit, it's about responsibility. I have obligations, and sometimes obligations have to wait," Caleb cut her off gently. "Sometimes the universe forces us to stop, to sit still, to be instead of do." He gestured at the windows, at the white void beyond. "Look at this as a gift instead of a crisis." "A gift?" She almost laughed. "I'm trapped in a cabin with a stranger, injured, cut off from everything, with a storm that might kill us both. That's not a gift. Depends on your perspective. You're alive. You're warm. You're fed. You're safe. And for the first time in how long, you have absolutely nothing you can do about work. You have permission, forced permission, but still to just exist." He met her eyes. "When's the last time you took a day off?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, frowned. I don't remember." "Exactly." They were quiet for a moment, the only sound the crackling fire and the endless wind. Then Ava said, "You're a very strange man, Caleb Foster." "I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one." The day stretched out before them, long and uncertain. Caleb busied himself with small tasks, checking the cabin for drafts and plugging them with rags, organizing firewood, taking inventory of food supplies. They had enough for a week, maybe more if they were careful. Canned goods mostly, some rice and pasta, flour for bread if it came to that. Ava watched him work, and gradually she started asking questions. Not CEO questions, but curious ones. How did the wood stove work? Why did he stack the wood that particular way? What were the pictures on the walls? He found himself answering, explaining things he normally took for granted. The stove was a Vermont castings model, older than he was, but built to last and efficient as hell. The wood was stacked with the cut ends facing out for air circulation. The pictures were a mix of family photos and landscape shots his father had taken over the years. "He was talented," Ava said, studying a photo of the Rockies at sunset, all purples and golds. "Your father?" "Yeah, photography was his hobby. This cabin was his before it was mine, built it himself in the 70s. Left it to me when he died." Caleb touched the frame lightly. "Sometimes I still feel like he's here, like he's watching, making sure I don't screw it up too badly." "I think he'd be proud of you." "Why? Because I kept his cabin from falling down?" "Because you're raising your daughter, because you help people, because you're kind." She said it simply, like it was obvious. Those things matter more than maintenance. Caleb felt something warm unfold in his chest. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. When was the last time someone had said he was kind? When was the last time someone had seen past the rough exterior to whatever was underneath? "Thank you," he said quietly. Around noon, the storm intensified again. The wind picked up to the point where it sounded like a freight train circling the cabin. Snow blew horizontally, creating a complete whiteout. Visibility was zero. The cabin shook with each gust, and Caleb found himself eyeing the rafters, calculating load limits, wondering how much more the structure could take. Ava noticed. "Should we be worried? This cabin stood for 50 years. It'll stand through this." But even he heard the uncertainty in his voice. She must have heard it too, because she said, "What's the worst-case scenario?" "Roof collapse under snow weight, or a tree falls on us, or the storm doesn't break and we run out of supplies." He decided honesty was better than false comfort. "But all of those are unlikely. This cabin was built to handle mountain weather, and it's handled worse than this. Has it? She looked skeptical. Worse than this? Winter of '03. I was a teenager. Storm lasted 5 days, dropped 8 feet of snow. My parents and I were snowed in for a week. We made it through fine. 8 feet? Ava's eyes widened. How is that even possible? Mountains make their own weather, and sometimes that weather is biblical. He managed to smile. We're at maybe 3 feet now. Still got 5 to go before I worry. She didn't look reassured, but she nodded. Okay. So we wait. We wait. The afternoon was harder than the morning. The cabin felt smaller, the walls closer. Caleb could see Ava growing restless, agitated. She tried to hide it, but kept checking her wrist, looking for the watch or phone that wasn't there, presumably. Her fingers drummed against her leg. She shifted positions constantly, unable to get comfortable. You want to play cards? Caleb asked finally. Cards? Yeah, I've got a deck somewhere. He rummaged in a drawer, found it. We could play gin rummy, or poker, or go fish if you want to keep it simple. Ava almost smiled. I haven't played cards since college. Good. Then I might actually win. He dealt out hands for gin rummy, explained the rules, and they settled into playing. It was awkward at first. She kept trying to make it competitive, to find angles and strategies, but gradually she relaxed into it, started making jokes when she lost, started laughing when he made a particularly stupid play. They played until the light began to fade, until Caleb had to light the lamps again. Then they cooked dinner together, Ava chopping vegetables one-handed while Caleb heated a pot of chili. She moved carefully, favoring her injured arm and ankle, but she insisted on helping. I'm not useless, she said when he suggested she rest. Never said you were. Just said you're injured. There's a difference. She echoed his words from earlier, and they shared a smile. They ate at the small kitchen table, sitting across from each other in lamplight. The chili was simple, but good, warming them from the inside. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside the cabin felt almost cozy, safe. This is strange, Ava said quietly. What is? This. Sitting here with you, eating chili in a cabin during a blizzard. She gestured vaguely with her spoon. Yesterday, I was at a gala with Denver's elite, wearing Prada and making small talk about market trends. 24 hours later, I'm in borrowed sweatpants eating from a pot. Which do you prefer? She considered the question seriously. Honestly, this. Is that crazy? No, just honest. Caleb wiped his bowl with bread. The other stuff, the galas and the Prada and the small talk, that's performance. This is real. I've spent so long performing, I'm not sure I know what real is anymore. She set down her spoon, looked at him. How do you do it? Stay grounded, stay real. I don't have a choice. Can't perform for Emma. She sees right through it. And out here, he gestured at the cabin around them. Out here, nature doesn't care about your act. It just is what it is. You adapt or you die. That's bleak. That's honest. He stood, started gathering dishes. But it's also freeing. No pretense, no games, just survival and connection and whatever meaning you can make. Ava helped him clean up, and they fell into an easy rhythm, him washing, her drying. It was domestic in a way that should have felt uncomfortable with a virtual stranger, but somehow didn't. The silence between them had changed from awkward to comfortable. When the dishes were done, they moved back to the living room. Caleb added wood to the fire while Ava settled on the couch. The wind had died down slightly, but snow was still falling. He could hear it whispering against the windows. Tell me more about Emma, Ava said. What's she like? Really like. So Caleb told her about Emma's love of fantasy novels and how she could recite entire passages from memory, about the way she hummed while she did homework, about her fear of thunderstorms but not blizzards, about how she talked to the photo of Sarah every night before bed, telling her mother about her day, about the time she'd rescued an injured rabbit and nursed it back to health, then cried for 2 days when they released it into the wild. She sounds wonderful, Ava said softly. She is. Sometimes I look at her and can't believe she's mine, that I had any part in creating someone that good. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. He paused, then asked, Do you ever regret it? Not having kids? Ava was quiet for a long moment. I tell myself I don't, that I made the right choice for my life, my career. But sometimes, she trailed off, looking at the fire. Sometimes I wonder what I missed, what it would be like to have someone who needed me that way. Not as a CEO or a business partner, but as a person, as family. It's not too late, you're only 36. And single, and working 80-hour weeks, and emotionally unavailable according to every relationship counselor I've ever seen. She laughed bitterly. I'm not exactly mother material. Sarah used to say that, Caleb said quietly. Used to say she was too selfish, too young, too unprepared. Then Emma was born and she just figured it out. Became exactly who Emma needed her to be. He looked at Ava. You're tougher than you think, more capable. If you wanted it, you'd make it work. Maybe I don't want it. Maybe. Or maybe you're just scared. Her eyes flashed. I'm not scared of anything. Everyone's scared of something. You're scared of letting go, of not being in control, of needing someone and having them leave. He held her gaze. I get it. I'm scared of the same things. The anger drained from her face, replaced by something softer, sadder. How do you do it? Live with the fear? I don't know that you ever stop being afraid. You just decide whether the fear runs you or you run through it. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at the endless white. Every day I'm terrified something will happen to Emma, that I'll lose her like I lost Sarah, that I'm not enough, that I'm failing her. But I can't let that fear stop me from being her father, from loving her, from showing up. That's brave. That's being a parent. He turned back to her. But it's also being human. We're all just doing our best with what we have. Outside, something changed. The wind dropped suddenly, the constant howl falling to a whisper. Snow continued to fall, but the violence had gone out of it. Caleb frowned, checking his watch. 7:30. Too early for the storm to be breaking, unless... The wind came back with a roar like nothing he'd heard before. It hit the cabin like a fist, and he heard wood crack somewhere above them. The entire structure groaned, shifting on its foundation. Caleb? Ava's voice was tight with fear. It's okay, he started to say, but then he heard it, a deep, ominous creaking from the roof. He looked up and saw the center beam bowing, saw snow forcing its way through gaps in the shingles, saw... Move! He shouted. He lunged for Ava, grabbing her around the waist and pulling her off the couch. They'd barely cleared it when the roof caved in with a sound like the end of the world. Timber and insulation and snow crashed down, burying the couch, smashing the coffee table, filling the air with dust and debris. Caleb threw himself over Ava, shielding her with his body as wood rained down around them. Something hit his shoulder, sharp pain but not unbearable. Something else clipped his head and the world spun. Then gradually, it stopped. The roar faded to settling sounds, creaks and groans, and the whisper of snow sliding. Caleb lifted his head, coughed on dust, tried to assess the damage. A section of the roof, maybe 8 feet across, had collapsed into the living room. Snow poured through the gap, already beginning to fill the space. The couch where Ava had been sitting was buried under a pile of timber and shingles. If she'd still been there. He didn't let himself finish the thought. Are you hurt? He asked, pulling back to look at Ava. She was pale, eyes wide with shock, but she shook her head. I don't think so. You? I'm fine. It wasn't entirely true. His shoulder throbbed and he could feel blood running down his face from where something had hit him, but it wasn't important. We need to move. The rest of the roof could go. He helped her up, supporting her weight as she limped away from the collapse. They made it to his bedroom, the farthest point from the damaged section, and he shut the door behind them as if that might somehow help. The bedroom was smaller, darker. A double bed took up most of the space, with a dresser and nightstand crammed against the walls. The only window was on the far wall, already half buried in snow. But the roof here looked solid. For now. What do we do? Ava asked. She was shaking, shock setting in. We survive. Caleb grabbed blankets from the bed, wrapped them around her. The bedroom's safe. We'll stay in here, keep warm. When morning comes and the storm breaks, I'll assess the damage. And if it doesn't break? If the whole roof goes? Then we deal with that when it happens. He touched her face, made her look at him. Hey, We're okay. You're okay, I've got you. She stared at him, and he saw the moment something shifted in her eyes. Saw her recognize that she was completely dependent on this stranger, that her life was in his hands, that all her money and power and control meant nothing out here. And instead of panic, he saw trust. Okay, she whispered. Okay. They settled on the floor with their backs against the bed, wrapped in blankets, as close to each other as propriety allowed. The temperature was already dropping with the roof open to the storm. Caleb could see his breath in the lamplight. I should check your injuries, Ava said, noticing the blood on his face. Later. Right now we need to stay warm. But she was already reaching up, dabbing at his head with the corner of a blanket. Her touch was gentle, surprisingly skilled. You saved my life, she said quietly. Again. Just making sure everyone gets home. Is that all I am to you? Everyone? She looked at him, and in the flickering light he saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. Because you're not just anyone to me. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what it meant or how to respond, so he did the only thing he could think of. He pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her, shared his warmth. And there, in the darkness, with the storm raging and the cabin falling apart around them, something unspoken passed between them. Something that felt dangerous and necessary and impossibly fragile. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding that this, whatever this was, mattered more than either of them wanted to admit. They stayed pressed together on the bedroom floor as the temperature continued its relentless drop. Caleb could feel Ava trembling against him, whether from cold or delayed shock, he couldn't tell. Probably both. His own adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain in its wake. His shoulder throbbed where the debris had struck him, and his head felt like someone was driving nails through his skull. We can't stay on the floor all night, Ava said after a while, her voice muffled against his chest. We'll freeze. She was right. Already his legs were going numb from the cold, seeping up through the floorboards. The bedroom was better than the destroyed living room, but without the wood stove's heat, it was still dangerously cold, and getting colder. The bed, he said. We'll need to share it. Body heat is all we've got now. He felt her stiffen slightly. Caleb, I know it's not ideal, but it's survival. I'll stay on top of the covers, you stay under them. We keep our clothes on. No different than what we were just doing, except horizontal. He pulled back to look at her. I'm not going to touch you inappropriately. You have my word. In the lamplight, he saw her face soften. I know, I trust you. She paused. That's the strange part. I've known you less than 24 hours, and I trust you more than people I've known for years. Maybe that says more about them than about me. Maybe it says something about both. She stood carefully, favoring her injured ankle. Help me up? Caleb got to his feet, ignoring the protest from his shoulder, and helped her onto the bed. She settled under the covers with a small sigh of relief, pulling them up to her chin. He grabbed every spare blanket he could find, winter quilts from the closet, the sleeping bag from the hall, even the throw from Sarah's side of the bed, and piled them on top. You'll suffocate me, Ava protested, but there was no heat in it. You'll thank me in an hour when the temperature drops another 10 degrees. He climbed onto the bed on top of the covers, lying on his side facing her. This okay? It's fine. She turned to face him, and they were close enough now that he could see flecks of darker gray in her storm cloud eyes. Could count the freckles across her nose that her makeup had hidden. Could see the vulnerability she worked so hard to conceal. Tell me something true. What? Tell me something true about yourself. Something you don't tell people. She pulled the blankets closer. We might die in here tonight. I want to know who I'm dying with. We're not dying with, Caleb said firmly. But he understood what she meant. The strange intimacy of crisis, the need to be known before the end. Okay, something true, he thought for a moment. I blame myself for Sarah's death. But you said it was cancer, Shaish. It was. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, inoperable, aggressive. Nothing anyone could have done. He stared at the shadows dancing on the ceiling. But I knew something was wrong for months before she got diagnosed. She was tired all the time, losing weight, said her stomach hurt. I told her it was stress, that she was working too hard, that she needed to rest more. She believed me because I was her husband, and she trusted me. His voice cracked. By the time she finally went to the doctor, it was too late. If I'd pushed her to go earlier, if I'd insisted, you can't know that would have changed anything, Ava said softly. I know. Everyone says that. The doctors, the counselor I saw after, Sarah's mother. But it doesn't change the guilt. Doesn't change the fact that I dismissed her pain because it was easier than facing the possibility of something being really wrong. He looked at Ava. I failed her. And I have to live with that every day. Ava reached out from under the covers and touched his face, her fingers cold against his skin. Sarah didn't think you failed her. I didn't know her, but I know she wouldn't have wanted you to carry this. How can you possibly know that? Because she chose you, married you, built a life with you, gave you a daughter. That's not the choice of someone who thought you'd fail her. Ava's hand dropped away. And from what you've told me about her, she sounds like someone who understood that we're all just doing our best. That sometimes our best isn't enough, and that's not failure. It's being human. Caleb felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. 4 years he'd carried this weight, this certainty of his own failure. Hearing someone else say it wasn't his fault should have felt hollow, should have bounced off the armor of his guilt. But coming from Ava, this stranger who had no reason to comfort him, who had nothing to gain from the lie, it felt different, felt true. Your turn, he said, his voice rough. Something true. Ava was quiet for so long he thought she might refuse. Then she said, I wasn't driving to Denver for a meeting. I was running away. From what? From everything. The company, the pressure, the expectations. From the life I've built that doesn't fit anymore. She closed her eyes. There was a board meeting yesterday morning. They want to take the company public, do an IPO. It would make everyone rich, me especially. It's everything David and I worked toward, everything we dreamed about. But I don't want it. I realize that sitting in that boardroom, listening to them talk about valuation and market timing and exit strategies, they're talking about selling David's legacy, my life's work, and all I could think was, what's the point? What does any of it matter if I'm miserable? She opened her eyes, looked at him. So I left. Went to the gala in Aspen because I was already committed, but I was going to skip the Denver meeting. Maybe fly to California instead, or Mexico, or just anywhere else. Anywhere I didn't have to be CEO Ava Sinclair for a while. Did you tell anyone? No, I just left. Got in my car and drove into a blizzard like an idiot. She laughed without humor. Guess the universe decided if I wanted to run away from my life, it would help me do it thoroughly. Or maybe, Caleb said slowly, the universe decided you needed to stop running, needed to be still long enough to figure out what you actually want. And what do I want? That's your answer to find, not mine. He shifted slightly, trying to ease the pressure on his shoulder. But I'll tell you what I see. I see someone who's brilliant and capable and so busy taking care of everyone else that she forgot to take care of herself. Someone who measures her worth by her productivity instead of her humanity. Someone who's terrified that if she stops moving, stops achieving, she'll discover there's nothing underneath. Ava stared at him, and he saw her eyes fill with tears. You see too much. Just what you're letting me see. He reached out, caught a tear with his thumb before it could fall. For what it's worth, I think you're worth more than any company, worth more than any achievement or title or quarterly earnings report. You're worth something just because you exist. I don't know if I believe that. You don't have to, not yet. But maybe that's what this is for. This forced stop, this time outside your normal life. Maybe you're supposed to learn to just be Ava, not CEO Ava or business partner Ava or anyone else. Just you. She turned her face into his hand, and for a moment they stayed like that, her tears wetting his palm, his thumb stroking her cheek. The wind howled outside, snow continued to fall through the collapsed roof in the next room, and the cold crept closer with every passing minute. But in that small space, on that bed, something warm was building between them, something neither of them had names for yet. I'm scared, Ava whispered, of the storm, of this. Of feeling this much. I've spent so long not feeling anything that this is... She trailed off, searching for words. Overwhelming, terrifying. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be vulnerable. Need someone. Trust that they won't leave. Her eyes found his. Everyone leaves eventually, Caleb. My brother died. My parents moved across the country. Every relationship I've had has ended. I learned a long time ago that the only person I can count on is myself. I get that. I really do. After Sarah died, I swore I'd never let anyone in again. It hurt too much to lose her. Why would I risk feeling that again? He moved closer until they were sharing breath. But Emma needed me to be more than my pain, needed me to show her that love is worth the risk of loss. And slowly I realized Sarah wouldn't want me to close myself off. She'd want me to live. It's not the same. You have Emma, a reason to keep going, to stay open. I have a company and an empty condo and a calendar full of meetings that don't matter. Then change it. Walk away from the company if it's killing you. Find something that does matter. Start over. He said it simply, as if it were easy, as if burning down your entire life and rebuilding from ash was something anyone could do. I can't just... Why not? What's really stopping you? Not money. You have plenty. Not obligation. You said yourself the board wants to go public, which means they want to buy you out. Not David's memory. He'd want you to be happy, not miserable in his name. Caleb held her gaze. The only thing stopping you is fear. And I understand fear. But I also understand that sometimes we have to walk through it anyway. Ava closed her eyes, and more tears slipped free. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and hard, and you'll question yourself every step of the way. But it's better than the alternative, spending the rest of your life in a cage you built yourself. He brushed hair from her face. You deserve more than that. You deserve to be happy. I don't know how to be happy anymore. I don't even know what that would look like. Then maybe that's where you start. Figure out what happiness might look like and move toward it, one small step at a time. They fell silent, the weight of the conversation settling over them like the blankets. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but Caleb thought maybe, it was losing some of its fury. The wind didn't hit quite as hard. The howling had dropped in pitch. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Tell me about Sarah, Ava said quietly. Not about her death, about her life. What made her laugh? Caleb smiled at the memory. Stupid jokes. The worse the pun, the harder she'd laugh. And she had this completely ridiculous laugh, like a honking goose. She hated it, tried to cover her mouth when she laughed. But I loved it. Loved that she could be so elegant and poised and then completely lose it over a terrible dad joke. What else? She sang in the shower, off-key, didn't know half the words, made up her own lyrics. She was terrible at cooking, burned everything. But she tried anyway. She collected rocks from every hike we took, labeled them with dates and locations, kept them in jars on the windowsill. His voice softened. She talked to plants like they were people, named them all, threatened to report them to Plant Protective Services if they didn't grow properly. Ava was smiling now. She sounds wonderful. She was. She was messy and warm and so full of life it seemed impossible that she could just stop. Even at the end, even when she was so weak she could barely speak, she was still trying to take care of everyone else, making sure Emma knew she was loved, making sure I'd be okay, asking about her mother's arthritis and whether the nurse's daughter got into college. He swallowed hard. She died worrying about everyone but herself. She sounds a lot like you. I wish. Sarah was better than me in every way that mattered. Kinder, braver, more generous. I'm just trying to live up to the example she set. I think you're succeeding. Ava shifted under the covers, and he felt her hand find his where it rested between them. Her fingers laced through his, tentative, testing. Is this okay? Yeah, Caleb said, his heart suddenly beating faster. This is okay. They lay like that, hands clasped, as the night deepened around them. Caleb could feel exhaustion pulling at him, but he fought it. He needed to stay alert, needed to monitor the cabin's structural integrity, needed to make sure Ava was okay. But Ava's breathing had already slowed into sleep, her face smoothing out, her grip on his hand relaxing but not releasing. She looked younger in sleep, less guarded, more like the woman she might have been if life hadn't taught her to armor herself. Caleb watched her for a while, marveling at the strangeness of the situation. 24 hours ago, she'd been a stranger in a wrecked car. Now she was sleeping in his bed, holding his hand, and he was feeling things he'd sworn he'd never feel again. It was too fast, too much, too complicated, and yet it felt inevitable, like they'd been moving toward this moment through all their separate grief and pain and loneliness, like the universe had been waiting for the right storm to throw them together. Eventually, despite his best intentions, his own eyes grew heavy. The cold, the exhaustion, the pain from his injuries, all of it caught up with him at once. He let himself drift, just for a moment, just to rest his eyes. He woke to darkness and cold so intense it hurt to breathe. The lamp had burned out of kerosene probably. The bedroom was pitch black except for a faint gray light coming from under the door. Dawn, maybe, or just the snow's reflection, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. He could see his breath in thick clouds. The water glass on the nightstand had a skim of ice across the top. "Ava," he said urgently, reaching for her. "Ava, wake up." She stirred slowly, too slowly. When he touched her face, her skin was cold. Too cold. "No," he breathed. "No, no, no." He threw off his layers and climbed under the covers with her, pulling her against him, sharing his body heat. She was shaking violently, her teeth chattering so hard he could hear them clicking. "Caleb?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. I've got you. Stay with me." He wrapped himself around her, rubbing her arms, her back, trying to generate warmth through friction. "Come on, Ava, don't do this. Stay awake. So cold, can't feel. I know it's cold, but you're going to be okay. Just stay with me." He kept talking, kept moving, kept fighting the cold that was trying to steal her away. His own body heat was all he had to give, and he gave it freely, holding nothing back. Minutes crawled past. Or maybe hours. Time lost meaning in the darkness. All that mattered was keeping Ava alive, keeping her warm, keeping her with him. Gradually, so gradually he almost didn't notice at first, she stopped shaking. Her breathing evened out. Her skin warmed fractionally under his hands. "Caleb?" Her voice was stronger now, more present. "I'm here. You're in the bed with me." "Yeah, you were hypothermic. I had to." He didn't pull away, didn't create distance. They were past the point of propriety. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been dipped in ice and wrung out." She shifted, pressing closer to his warmth. But better, warmer. They lay tangled together under the mountain of blankets, and Caleb became acutely aware of her body against his, the curve of her hip under his hand, the way her breath warmed his neck, the soft press of her breasts against his chest. He should move, should create some professional distance now that the immediate crisis had passed, should remember that she was a stranger, that this was just survival, that he had no business feeling what he was feeling. But he didn't move, and neither did she. "The storm," Ava said after a while. "Is it still going?" Caleb listened. The wind had died down to almost nothing. No howling, no rattling of windows, no sound of snow hitting the walls, just an eerie quiet. "I think it's breaking," he said. "Finally." "How long have we been in here?" He checked his watch, squinting to see the face in the darkness. "About 10 hours. It's almost 6 in the morning." "Feels like a lifetime." "Yeah, it does." They were quiet again, and in that quiet something shifted. Caleb felt it in the way Ava's hand moved from his shoulder to his face, tracing the line of his jaw. Felt it in the way her breathing changed, quickened. Felt it in his own racing pulse, in the sudden awareness of every point of contact between their bodies. "Caleb," she whispered. "Yeah? I know this is crazy. I know we barely know each other. I know this is probably just adrenaline and proximity and Ava. And it doesn't mean anything, can't mean anything because I live in Denver and you live here and we're from different worlds. Ava. But I need you to know that I haven't felt this alive in years. That being here with you, even in the middle of this nightmare, is the most real I've felt since David died." He kissed her. It was the only way to stop the spiral of words, the only way to show her that he felt it too, this impossible pull between them. His lips found hers in the darkness, tentative at first, testing. She froze for a heartbeat, and then she was kissing him back with a desperation that matched his own. It wasn't gentle. It was raw and hungry, and edged with all the fear and loneliness and need they'd both been carrying. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. His hand slid into her hair, cradling her head as he deepened the kiss. They kissed like people drowning, like this contact was oxygen, like they could somehow consume each other's pain and loneliness and transform it into something else, something better. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb pressed his forehead against hers. "This is crazy," he said. "Completely insane," she agreed. "We shouldn't, probably not, but I don't want to stop." "Me neither." They kissed again, slower this time, learning each other. The shape of her mouth, the taste of her, the small sound she made when he kissed the corner of her jaw. She explored him with the same intensity she probably brought to everything, focused, thorough, memorizing. His hand found the curve of her waist, and she arched into his touch. Her fingers slipped under his shirt, mapping the muscles of his back. Heat built between them, chasing away the cold, making the frozen room feel tropical. "Wait," Caleb said, pulling back. "Wait, we need to talk about this." "Now?" Ava's voice was frustrated, breathless. "You want to talk now?" "Yes, now, before this goes further." He forced himself to create space between them, to think clearly despite the want coursing through him. "I need to know this isn't just survival instinct, isn't just the storm and the fear and being thrown together. What if it is?" She propped herself up on one elbow, and he could just make out her face in the growing dawn light. "What if it's all of that and it's still real?" "Is it real?" Ava was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her voice was steady, certain. "I've spent my entire adult life controlling everything, my emotions, my image, my relationships, keeping everything neat and managed and safe. But you," she touched his face, "you make me want to be messy, want to feel things, want to be vulnerable and human, and all the things I've been too scared to be. So yes, maybe this started as survival, but it's become something more. At least for me." Caleb caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "For me too, and that terrifies me." "Because of Sarah?" "Because of what it means if I let myself feel this. If I let you in and then lose you too. I don't know if I could survive that again." "You can't live your life afraid of loss," Ava said softly. "That's not living. That's just existing," says the woman who admitted she runs from everything. "Maybe we're both learning." She moved closer again, eliminating the space he'd created. "Maybe we can learn together, just for now, just for this moment. Tomorrow we can go back to our separate worlds, our separate lives. But right now, in this cabin, with this storm, can't we just be two people who found each other in the dark?" she echoed. And then they were kissing again, and the rest of the world, the storm, the cold, the broken cabin, their separate complicated lives, faded away until there was only this, only them, only the warmth they created together in the darkness. Outside, dawn was breaking. The storm that had raged for nearly 2 days was finally exhausting itself, the snow tapering off, the wind dying to whispers. Light, pale and tentative, began to creep through the cracks around the door. But inside the bedroom, wrapped in blankets and each other, Caleb and Ava stayed in their own private darkness a little while longer. Stayed in the space between their old lives and whatever came next. Stayed in the moment where anything seemed possible and nothing hurt. When they finally pulled apart again, both flushed and breathing hard, Caleb smoothed her hair back from her face. "We should check the cabin, see how bad the damage is." "Not yet," Ava said. 5 more minutes, please." So they lay together, tangled and warm, as the light grew stronger. As the impossible night gave way to an uncertain morning, as the storm that had brought them together finally, mercifully, broke, Caleb knew they'd have to face reality soon. Have to deal with the collapsed roof and the cold and the question of rescue. Have to figure out what this thing between them meant, if it meant anything at all beyond the extraordinary circumstances that had created it. But right now, in this moment, with Ava's head on his shoulder and her hand over his heart, he let himself just feel. Let himself be present in a way he hadn't been since Sarah's death. Let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, he could have this connection, intimacy, the terrifying joy of letting someone in. Caleb? Ava's voice was soft. Yeah? Thank you for saving my life, for taking care of me, for... She trailed off, then finished simply, for seeing me. Thank you for letting me. He kissed the top of her head. For trusting me. For being here. Where else would I be? She smiled against his chest. My car's buried in a ditch and my phone's dead. I'm pretty much your prisoner. Worst prison ever. She laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Actually, I'm starting to think it might be the best thing that's ever happened to me. Before Caleb could respond to that, before he could examine what it meant, what it promised, what it might cost them both, a sound from the other room made them both freeze. A loud crack, followed by the groan of stressed wood, then a crash that shook the entire cabin. What was that? Ava asked, tension flooding back into her body. Caleb was already moving, extracting himself from the blankets despite his body's protest. Stay here. Like hell, she said, struggling to sit up. If the cabin's collapsing, I'm not staying in bed. He wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her face. This was not a woman who waited to be saved. She'd come with him, or she'd follow on her own, injured ankle or not. Fine, but stay behind me. He helped her up, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, then slowly opened the bedroom door. The sight that greeted them made his heart sink. The rest of the living room ceiling had come down while they slept. What had been a partial collapse was now complete devastation. Snow filled the space in drifts 3 feet deep. The furniture, what he could see of it, was buried. The wood stove was visible, but the chimney pipe had been torn away. Cold air poured into the cabin through the gaping hole above. Oh my God, Ava breathed. Caleb assessed the damage with a professional eye, years of construction experience kicking in. The main support beam had cracked. He could see the split running through its center. The weight of the snow on the roof had been too much for the old timber. The bedroom they'd sheltered in had its own support structure, which was probably the only reason they were still alive. But the rest of the cabin... It's not safe, he said quietly. We need to get out. Out? Into the storm? Storm's over. Look. He pointed to the hole in the ceiling. Blue sky was visible beyond, actual, honest-to-God blue sky. The sun was even trying to break through, sending weak golden light down into the destroyed living room. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. Where will we go? Ava asked. The shed. It's small but solid. We can wait there until search and rescue comes. He turned to her. Can you walk? She tested her ankle gingerly, winced but nodded. I can manage. They gathered what they could. Blankets, the remaining food, the first aid kit, bottles of water. Caleb found his heavy coat and boots, helped Ava into Sarah's winter gear. It was too big for her, but it would keep her warm. The journey from the bedroom to the front door was treacherous. They had to climb over debris, navigate around snowdrifts, avoid sections where the floor felt unstable. Caleb went first, testing each step, then helping Ava across. Her face was tight with pain, but she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop. When they finally pushed open the front door, the cold hit them like a wall. But it was a different cold than the storm, crisp and clean instead of vicious. The wind was nothing more than a gentle breeze. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, smoothing out the world, making it look peaceful. Caleb helped Ava down the steps, supporting most of her weight. The snow came up past their knees, making every step a struggle. The shed was only 50 feet away, but it felt like miles. They were halfway there when Ava stumbled, nearly taking them both down. Caleb caught her, held her steady. I've got you, he said. I know, she replied. And the trust in her voice, the absolute certainty, made something in his chest expand painfully. They made it to the shed, a small structure his father had built to house tools and the generator. Caleb kicked the door open and helped Ava inside. It was cramped and smelled of gasoline and motor oil, but it was intact, protected. He settled Ava on an upturned crate, wrapped her in blankets, then went back out to assess their situation. The cabin behind them looked like something from a disaster movie. Roof caved in, walls sagging, one window blown out completely. It was a miracle they'd survived, but they had survived. Against all odds, through storm and cold and structural collapse, they'd made it through. Caleb pulled out his phone. Dead, as expected. He'd try to charge it later somehow, once they got the generator running. For now, they were still cut off from the world. Still alone. He looked up at the sky, gauging the weather. Clear now, but more storms were coming. He could see the clouds building on the western horizon. They had maybe 24 hours before the next system moved in, which meant search and rescue had 24 hours to find them. He heard movement behind him and turned to find Ava standing in the shed doorway, one hand braced against the frame for support. "You should be resting," he said. "I'm fine." But her face was pale, pain etched around her eyes. "What's the plan?" "Wait for rescue. They'll be looking for you. Your assistant will have reported you missing, and they'll be checking on residents after a storm like this. Someone will come. And if they don't, then we hike out. But let's give it a day or two. Let your ankle heal. Let me figure out supplies. No point taking unnecessary risks." He moved to her side, slipped an arm around her waist. "Come on, back inside. You need to stay warm." She let him guide her back to the crate, but she didn't sit. Instead, she turned to face him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "Caleb," she said quietly, "about what happened in there. Between us." Here it comes, he thought, the morning after regret, the acknowledgement that it was a mistake, that they got carried away, that it didn't mean anything. "It's okay," he said, giving her an out. "We were stressed, scared, not thinking clearly. We don't have to. I wasn't going to say it was a mistake." She looked up at him, and her eyes were clear, certain. "I was going to say, I don't want it to be just a moment. Just a thing that happened because of the storm." Caleb's breath caught. "Ava, I know it's complicated. I know we live different lives in different places. I know there are 1,000 reasons this can't work, but I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone since—" She paused, searching for words. "Since ever, maybe. And I don't want to walk away from it without at least trying to see what it could be." He stared at her, this fierce woman who'd crashed into his life during a blizzard. This stranger who'd somehow become essential in the space of 2 days. This person who made him want to take risks again, to open his heart again, to believe that maybe he deserved something more than just survival. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I've been alone for so long. And even before that, Sarah and I, we grew up together. We learned each other slowly over years. This, you and me, it's fast and intense, and I don't know how to—" Ava stood on her toes, wincing at the movement, and kissed him gently. "We figure it out together. One step at a time. No expectations, no pressure. Just possibility. Can you live with possibility?" Could he? Could he risk his heart again, knowing how much it hurt to lose someone? Could he open himself up to Ava, this woman who lived in a different world, who'd be going back to her life of board meetings and business decisions while he stayed here in the mountains with his daughter and his snowplow? But even as he asked himself the questions, he knew the answer. Because Ava was right. This wasn't just adrenaline or proximity or survival instinct. This was real and rare and precious. And he'd be a fool to walk away from it without trying. "Yeah," he said, pulling her close. "I can live with possibility." She smiled against his chest, and they stood there in the doorway of the shed, holding each other as the sun climbed higher and the world around them began to wake from its frozen sleep. Somewhere in the distance, Caleb heard the faint sound of helicopter rotors. Search and rescue, already starting their sweeps. They'd be found soon. Would be separated, would return to their separate lives. But for now, for this moment, they had each other. Had the promise of something more. Had possibility. And sometimes, Caleb thought, possibility was enough. The helicopter sound grew louder, closer, and Caleb felt Ava tense in his arms. Reality was coming for them, roaring in on rotor blades and the promise of rescue. The bubble they'd been living in, this small space outside of time where only they existed, was about to burst. "They'll take me to a hospital," Ava said quietly, not pulling away from him. "Run tests, check my injuries. My assistant will be there with a phone and a tablet and 17 messages that need immediate attention. And I'll need to get to Emma, Caleb added. Make sure she's okay, that she wasn't too worried. Figure out what to do about the cabin. So this is it. Back to real life. Yeah. He tightened his arms around her. This is it. But neither of them moved. Neither wanted to be the first to let go, to acknowledge that the moment was ending. The helicopter was circling now, the sound echoing off the mountains. They'd spotted something, probably the destroyed cabin, the smoke that should have been coming from the chimney but wasn't, the general wrongness of the scene. I don't have your number, Ava said suddenly, pulling back to look at him. I don't know your address or your email or how to find you. When they take me away, I won't have any way to reach you. Caleb hadn't thought of that. In the age of constant connection, they'd been completely disconnected. He didn't know her number either, didn't have any way to contact her beyond the name of her company. Sinclair Technologies, he said. In Denver. I can find you through that. What if you don't? What if you go home to Emma and realize this was just a strange interlude, nothing more? What if you decide I'm too complicated, too much work, too different from your life? Her voice was rising, panic edging in. What if I never hear from you again? He caught her face in his hands, made her look at him. Hey, listen to me. I will find you. I promise. This isn't over unless you want it to be. I don't. I really don't. Tears were streaming down her face now. God, this is insane. I've known you for 2 days. 2 days. I shouldn't feel like my heart is being ripped out at the thought of leaving you. But you do. But I do, she confirmed miserably. The helicopter was landing now, somewhere on the other side of the cabin where the driveway would be under all that snow. Voices called out, search and rescue, checking for survivors, ready to evacuate them to safety. Caleb kissed her one more time, trying to pour everything he felt into it, everything he didn't have words for, everything that had bloomed between them in the darkness and cold. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard, both crying. I'll find you, he said again. I swear it. You better, Ava replied, trying for humor through her tears. Because I'm pretty sure I just fell in love with you, Caleb Foster, and I'd really like to see where that goes. The words hit him like a physical blow. Love. She'd said love. After 2 days, after a storm, after everything, she'd said it out loud, made it real. Ava, you don't have to say it back. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I wanted you to know. Wanted you to understand that this mattered to me, that you matter. She stepped back, creating distance, armor already starting to rebuild. Now go check on your daughter. I'll handle the rescue team. But Caleb couldn't move, couldn't let her walk away thinking he didn't feel it too. I love you too, he said, the words rushing out. I don't know how or why or what we do about it, but I love you too. Her smile was brilliant, transforming her face. Then we'll figure it out, together. Together, he agreed. The voices were getting closer, calling out for survivors. Caleb grabbed Ava's hand and they made their way around the cabin toward the sound. The snow was easier to navigate now. They'd packed it down on their journey to the shed, but Ava still struggled. He supported her weight, moving slowly, carefully. They rounded the corner to find 3 rescue personnel in bright orange gear heading toward them. The lead, a woman with kind eyes and efficient movements, immediately focused on Ava. Ma'am, are you injured? Can you walk? Sprained ankle, possible concussion, some bruising, Ava rattled off clinically. I can walk with assistance. We'll take you to Summit Medical Center, get you checked out properly. The woman turned to Caleb. Sir, are you hurt? I'm fine, nothing serious, he gestured at the destroyed cabin. But I'll need to secure the property, contact insurance. Can you give me a few hours before extraction? Weather windows closing, another rescuer, younger, male, said, checking his tablet. Another storm system moving in. If you don't come now, you might be stuck for another few days. Caleb looked at the cabin, at the years of memories buried under snow and broken timber. Looked at his father's photographs that might be destroyed, at Sarah's things that he'd never been able to sort through. Then he looked at Ava, who was being loaded onto a stretcher despite her protests. I'll take my chances, he said. I need to take care of this. Caleb, no, Ava called out. Come with us, please. but he shook his head. I can't. Not yet. Emma's safe with her grandmother. I know that. But this cabin, he gestured helplessly. It's all I have left of them. My father, Sarah. I can't just abandon it. He saw the moment Ava understood, saw her realize that he needed this, needed to say goodbye to the past before he could fully embrace a future, even a future with her. Okay, she said softly. Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't take stupid risks. I promise. And promise me you'll call the second you're back in cell range. I don't have your number, remember? The lead rescuer pulled out a pad and pen, handed them to Ava. She scrawled a number quickly, then added something else below it, tore off the sheet, and pressed it into Caleb's hand. My direct line. Go straight to my cell. Call anytime, day or night. She paused. The other number is my assistant, Marcus. If you can't reach me, call him. He'll know how to find me. Marcus, who you said would be furious you missed your meeting? Yeah, that Marcus. He's probably already organized 3 search parties and filed a missing persons report with every law enforcement agency in Colorado. Despite the situation, she smiled. He's very efficient. They were loading her into the helicopter now. Caleb walked with them as far as he could, still holding her hand. At the helicopter's door, he had to let go, had to watch them strap her in, watch the medics start checking her vitals, watch the world start pulling her away from him. She pressed her hand against the window, and he pressed his against it from the outside. They stayed like that until the pilot started the engine and he had to back away. The rotors spun faster, snow kicking up in a blinding cloud. The helicopter lifted, slowly at first, then faster, rising into the blue sky. Caleb stood in the snow, watching until it was nothing more than a speck on the horizon. Until the sound of the rotors faded to nothing and he was alone again with the wind and the silence. He looked down at the paper in his hand. Her phone number, yes, but also a note scrawled beneath it. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. Thank you. I'll be waiting. A. He folded it carefully, tucked it into his wallet where it would be safe. Then he turned back to the cabin and the work ahead. The next several hours were brutal. Caleb salvaged what he could from the wreckage. Photo albums that had survived in a closet, Sarah's jewelry box, Emma's baby book. He found his father's camera, miraculously intact in its case. Found the wooden jewelry box he'd been making for Emma's birthday, only slightly damaged. He covered the hole in the roof with tarps and plywood he found in the shed, knowing it wouldn't last long, but hoping it would protect what remained until he could arrange proper repairs. He shut off the water main, drained the pipes so they wouldn't freeze and burst, did everything he could think of to secure the place. By the time he was done, the sun was starting to set and his whole body ached. His shoulder, where the debris had hit him, was throbbing. His head pounded from the earlier injury. He was exhausted and hungry and cold down to his bones, but he'd done what he needed to do. Said his goodbyes to the cabin as it had been, accepted what it would have to become. He fired up his truck. Amazingly, it started on the first try and began the slow journey down the mountain. The roads were barely passable, plowed just enough for emergency vehicles. It took him 3 hours to make a journey that normally took 40 minutes. But finally, he pulled up in front of his mother-in-law's house in Copper Creek. The lights were on, warm and welcoming. He could see Emma's silhouette in the window, and the sight of her made his eyes burn with tears. He'd made it home. They'd both made it home. Emma flew out the door before he'd even fully stopped the truck, launching herself at him the moment he stepped out. Daddy, we were so worried. Grandma said you were stuck in the storm, and I thought, I'm okay, Em. He picked her up despite his protesting shoulder, held her tight. I'm okay. I'm sorry I scared you. Don't ever do that again, she demanded, her face buried in his neck. Promise me you won't ever do that again. I promise to try. He carried her inside where Sarah's mother, Janet, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, was waiting. Hey, Janet? Don't you hey Janet me, Caleb Foster. You look like hell. But her voice was warm, relieved. Come inside. There's soup on the stove and a guest room made up. You're not driving anywhere else tonight. He didn't argue, didn't have the energy. He let Janet feed him, let Emma chatter about her 2 days with Grandma, let himself be cared for. But part of his mind was elsewhere, with a woman in a hospital in Denver who'd promised to wait for him. After Emma was asleep, curled up in Janet's guest room with her favorite stuffed dragon, Caleb borrowed Janet's phone to check his messages. His own phone was charging but wouldn't power on for another hour at least. He'd missed 23 calls, 17 from the county, checking on him after the storm. 4 from Emma's school, closed for weather. 1 from Tommy Richardson, thanking him for fixing the furnace and hoping he'd made it home okay. And 1 from a number he didn't recognize, left just an hour ago. He played the voicemail, and Ava's voice filled his ear. "Caleb, it's me. I'm at the hospital. They're keeping me overnight for observation, but I'm fine. Everything's fine. The doctors say I was incredibly lucky, that if I'd been out there much longer." She paused, and he heard her take a shaky breath. "Anyway, I wanted you to know I'm okay, that I'm thinking about you, that I meant what I said. Call me when you can, please." Caleb saved the message, then stared at the phone for a long moment. It was late, almost midnight. She was probably asleep. He should wait until morning to call back, but she'd said call any time, day or night. He stepped outside onto the porch where he wouldn't disturb anyone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Caleb?" Her voice was fuzzy with sleep but immediately alert. "Is everything okay?" Yeah, everything's fine. I'm at my mother-in-law's with Emma, safe and warm." He sat down on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. I needed to hear your voice. I'm glad you called. I was lying here thinking about you, about the cabin, about everything that happened." A rustling sound like she was sitting up in bed. "How bad is the damage?" "Bad enough. It'll take major reconstruction, months of work probably, but the important stuff, the photos, the memories, I got most of it out." "And how are you, really? Tired, sore, missing you." The admission came easily, naturally. "That's crazy, right? Missing someone I just met?" "If it's crazy, then we're both crazy." Her voice softened. "I miss you too. This hospital bed is cold and uncomfortable, and all I can think about is being back in that bedroom with you, under all those blankets." Caleb smiled. "The bedroom that was about 30 degrees and we were basically hypothermic? But we were together, and warm where it counted." She paused. "When can I see you?" "I don't know. I need to be with Emma for a few days, make sure she's okay, and I need to deal with the insurance company, figure out the cabin repairs. Maybe a week?" "A week is forever." "I know. But Emma has to come first. She's been through enough. I can't just take off right after scaring her half to death." "Of course not. Your daughter needs you. I understand that." But he could hear the disappointment in her voice. "What about next weekend? Could you come to Denver? Bring Emma if you want. I'd love to meet her." The image of introducing Emma to Ava, of his two worlds colliding, was both terrifying and oddly right. "Let me talk to her about it. But yeah, maybe, if she's comfortable with the idea." "No pressure. We'll figure something out. We have time." Did they? Caleb wondered. Or would the magic of the storm fade when faced with the reality of their different lives? Would Ava return to her world of board meetings and quarterly earnings and realize that a small-town mechanic didn't fit into it? Would he look at her life of luxury and power and feel inadequate, out of place? "You're thinking too hard," Ava said, reading his silence. "I can hear your brain working from here. Just wondering if this can actually work, if we can work. Only one way to find out." Her voice was firm, certain. "We try. We take it one day at a time, one step at a time. And we don't give up just because it's hard or complicated or scary." "When did you become the optimist?" "When I met a man who reminded me that some things are worth taking risks for." She yawned, exhaustion catching up with her. "I should let you go. You need sleep." "So do you." "I will. But Caleb?" She waited until he acknowledged. "Thank you for saving me, for seeing me, for making me believe in possibility again." "Thank you for crashing into my life," he replied. "Literally." She laughed, and the sound made him ache with missing her. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Ava. I'll call you tomorrow." "I'll be waiting." He ended the call and sat on the porch for a long time, processing everything. 2 days ago, his life had been simple, predictable, safe. Now it was complicated and uncertain and terrifying, and he'd never felt more alive. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Caleb met with the insurance adjuster, who confirmed the cabin was a total loss structurally, but most of the contents were salvageable. He arranged for a contractor to assess what could be rebuilt and what would need to be started from scratch. He spent hours on the phone with various agencies, filling out forms, providing documentation, and every evening he called Ava. They talked about everything and nothing, her recovery, his day with Emma, their hopes and fears. She told him about the chaos at her company when she'd disappeared for 3 days, about how Marcus had indeed filed missing persons reports with 5 different agencies. She told him about the board meeting she'd missed, about how they were moving forward with the IPO plans without her input. "I should care more than I do," she admitted on the 3rd night. "This is everything we worked for, everything David and I dreamed about, but all I can think about is getting back to the mountains, getting back to you. The IPO is still months away, right? You have time to figure out what you want." "I know what I want," she said simply. "The question is whether I have the courage to go after it." On the 4th day, Caleb finally talked to Emma about Ava. They were making dinner together, grilled cheese and tomato soup, Emma's favorite, when he brought it up. There's something I need to tell you." She looked up from where she was buttering bread, her expression immediately wary. "Is it bad? Did something else break in the storm?" "No, nothing like that. I met someone. During the storm. A woman." Emma's eyes went wide. "A woman? Like a girlfriend woman?" "Maybe. It's new and complicated, and I don't know what it is yet. But I wanted you to know about her." He set down the spatula, gave her his full attention. "Her name is Ava. She was in a car accident, and I helped her, and we ended up stuck in the cabin together during the storm." "Is she nice?" "Very nice, and smart and funny, and—" He struggled for words. "She's special, Em. I really like her." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Do you love her?" The question was so direct, so Emma, that Caleb couldn't help but smile. "Yeah, kiddo, I think I do." "Does she love you?" "She says she does." "Then that's good." Emma went back to buttering bread, but Caleb could see her mind working. "Daddy? Yeah? Is it okay that you love her, even though you loved Mommy?" Caleb's heart clenched. This was the question he'd been dreading, the one he wasn't sure how to answer. "Come here, Em." She climbed into his lap and he wrapped his arms around her. "Your mom will always be my first love. Always. She gave me you, and you're the best thing in my world. Nothing and no one will ever change that." He felt Emma relax slightly. "But loving Ava doesn't mean I love Mommy less. Love isn't like that. It doesn't run out or get used up. The heart just gets bigger to make room. Like when I got Mr. Whiskers?" Emma referred to her cat, adopted 2 years after Sarah's death. "I still loved Mommy even though I loved Mr. Whiskers too?" "Exactly like that." Emma thought about this, then nodded. "Okay, can I meet her?" "Would you want to?" "Yeah, if she's important to you, I should meet her. That's what Grandma says, that families should know the people who are important to each other. Family." The words settled over Caleb like a warm blanket. Emma was calling Ava potentially part of their family, and instead of feeling threatening, it felt right. "How about next weekend? We could drive to Denver, take you to that science museum you've been wanting to visit, and have lunch with Ava." Emma's face lit up. "Really? The one with the dinosaurs and the planetarium?" "That's the one." "Then yes, definitely yes." She hugged him tight. "Daddy, I'm glad you met her. You've been sad for so long. Maybe she can help you be happy again." Out of the mouths of babes, Caleb thought. His 9-year-old daughter had just articulated what he'd been too scared to admit, that he'd been merely surviving instead of living, and Ava had reminded him there was a difference. That night, he called Ava with the news. "We're coming to Denver this weekend. Emma wants to meet you." He heard her sharp intake of breath. "She does? Really?" "Really. Fair warning, she's very direct and will probably ask you 1,000 questions. And she'll be judging whether you're good enough for her dad." No pressure or anything, but Ava sounded more excited than nervous. "What is she like? What should I know about her?" So Caleb told her. Told her about Emma's love of science and fantasy, her fear of thunderstorms, her protectiveness of the people she loved. Told her about how Emma still talked to Sarah's photo every night, about how she kept her mother's memory alive through stories and rituals. "She sounds amazing," Ava said softly, "and terrifying. What if she doesn't like me?" "She'll like you. How could she not?" Caleb said it with more confidence than he felt. Emma was the most important person in his world. If she didn't approve of Ava, if she wasn't comfortable with their relationship, that would be a problem. A big one. But he had to trust that Emma would see in Ava what he saw: kindness, strength, authenticity. He had to believe that the connection he felt wasn't one-sided, that Ava would love his daughter as fiercely as he did. "What if I mess this up?" Ava asked quietly. "I don't know anything about kids, Caleb. I've never been around them. What if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, or then you'll apologize and try again. That's what parenting is. A series of mistakes followed by apologies and do-overs." He smiled. "Besides, Emma's pretty forgiving. As long as you're genuine with her, she'll give you a chance." "Genuine I can do. It's all you've let me be since we met." They talked for another hour, making plans for the weekend. The science museum, lunch at a place Emma would like, maybe a walk around downtown if the weather cooperated. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make Emma feel like she was being shown off. Just a normal day with a new person who happened to be important to her father. When they finally hung up, Caleb felt a mix of anticipation and terror. This weekend would determine everything. If Emma and Ava connected, if they could find common ground, then maybe they could build something real, something lasting. And if they didn't, well, he'd cross that bridge when he came to it. The days until Saturday crawled past. Caleb worked on cabin repairs, spent time with Emma, talked to Ava every night. She told him about returning to work, about how strange it felt to sit in meetings discussing metrics and strategies when her mind was in the mountains. "I don't fit here anymore," she confessed on Friday night. "I look around at my corner office and my view of the city and my calendar full of important meetings, and all I can think is, what's the point? These people don't need me. They need a CEO, sure, but it doesn't have to be me. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm figuring it out." She paused. "Marcus thinks I'm having a nervous breakdown. He keeps suggesting I take a vacation, see a therapist, anything to explain why I'm suddenly questioning everything." "Are you? Having a breakdown?" "Maybe, or maybe I'm finally breaking through." She laughed softly. "Either way, I'm not the same person who drove into that storm. That person died in the crash, and I'm still figuring out who came out the other side." Caleb understood that. Understood the way trauma could crack you open, could force you to examine everything you thought you knew about yourself. He'd gone through it after Sarah's death, had emerged as someone different, not better or worse, just changed. "You'll figure it out," he said, "and whatever you decide, I'm here." "Even if I decide to do something crazy, like walk away from everything?" "Especially if you do something crazy." He meant it. Whatever Ava chose, whatever path she decided to walk, he'd support it. That's what love was, not just accepting someone as they were, but championing who they were becoming. Saturday morning arrived clear and cold. Caleb and Emma loaded into the truck early, planning to reach Denver by late morning. Emma chattered nervously the entire drive, alternating between excitement about the museum and anxiety about meeting Ava. "What if she doesn't like me?" Emma asked as they hit the outskirts of Denver. "Impossible. You're the coolest 9-year-old on the planet." "Dad." But she was smiling. "What if I don't like her?" "Then you tell me, and we figure it out together, but give her a fair chance, okay? Don't decide before you've met her." "I won't. I promise." Emma looked out the window at the city passing by. "Daddy, are you scared?" "Terrified," he admitted. "Me too. But Mommy used to say that being scared just means something matters." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "Your mom was a very smart woman." They met Ava at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. She was waiting outside the entrance, and Caleb's heart stuttered at the sight of her. She was dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, but she still looked elegant, out of place against the backdrop of families with screaming kids and school groups. Then she saw them, and her face transformed. The nervous tension melted into genuine joy, and suddenly she wasn't intimidating corporate CEO Ava Sinclair. She was just Ava, the woman who'd held his hand in the darkness and told him he was worth more than his grief. "Hi," she said as they approached. Her eyes went immediately to Emma. "You must be Emma. I've heard so much about you." Emma studied her with serious eyes, taking her measure. Then she said, "Did you really crash your car in a blizzard wearing a fancy dress?" Ava laughed, surprised. "I really did. It was very stupid of me." "Daddy says you're smart." "Your dad is generous. I'm smart about some things and really dumb about others. Driving in Colorado winter storms is apparently one of the dumb things." Emma considered this, then nodded. "That's okay. Everyone's dumb about something. I'm dumb about math." "I love math," Ava said. "Maybe I could help you with it sometime?" "Maybe." Emma slipped her hand into Caleb's, still uncertain. "Can we see the dinosaurs now?" The next 3 hours were a revelation. Caleb watched Ava with his daughter and saw her carefully building a bridge between them. She asked Emma questions and actually listened to the answers. She admitted when she didn't know something instead of pretending. She let Emma lead the way through the exhibits, following her enthusiasm. And slowly, gradually, Emma warmed to her. Started asking Ava questions instead of just answering them. Started including her in conversations instead of just talking to Caleb. By the time they reached the planetarium show, Emma sat between them and reached for Ava's hand when the lights went down. After the museum, they went to lunch at a pizza place Emma loved. The three of them crammed into a booth, sharing a large pepperoni pizza and laughing at Emma's stories about school. And then Tyler Johnson said he could eat more pizza than anyone, so we had a contest at lunch and he ate 7 slices, but I ate 8, even though I'm smaller than him, and he got so mad he tried to tell the teacher I was cheating. But how do you cheat at eating pizza? Emma said it all in one breath, her hands gesturing wildly. "That's impressive," Ava said seriously. 8 slices is a lot of pizza. "I felt sick after," Emma admitted, "but it was worth it to see Tyler's face." They all laughed, and Caleb felt something shift in his chest. This was right. The three of them together felt natural, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. After lunch, they walked around downtown despite the cold. Emma ran ahead, pointing out things she wanted to show Ava. A funny statue, a store with cool window displays, a dog that looked like it was smiling. "She's wonderful," Ava said quietly to Caleb. "You've done an amazing job with her." "She's done most of the work herself. She's been teaching me how to be a parent since the day she was born." "She talks about Sarah a lot." "Yeah, I encourage it. I don't want her to forget her mother, and talking about her keeps the memories alive." Ava was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'd like to hear about Sarah too. Not just the sad parts, the happy parts, the parts that made you love her." Caleb looked at her in surprise. Most people avoided talking about Sarah, uncomfortable with death, unsure how to navigate his grief. But Ava was asking to know her, to understand the woman who'd come before. "Why?" he asked. "Because she's part of who you are, part of what made you into the man I love. I want to understand all of you, Caleb, even the parts that hurt." So as they walked through downtown Denver, with Emma running ahead and the winter sun trying to break through the clouds, Caleb told Ava about Sarah, about their first date at a terrible chain restaurant where the food was awful, but they'd laughed until they cried, about the way she'd sung to Emma when she was a baby, making up songs about diaper changes and midnight feedings, about how she'd learned to ski just so she could share his love of the mountains, even though she'd hated being cold. And Ava listened, really listened, not just waiting for her turn to talk, but absorbing every story, every memory, every piece of the life Caleb had lived before she crashed into it. "She would have liked you," Caleb said eventually. "You think?" "Yeah. Sarah always said I was too serious, too closed off. She'd be happy that I found someone who makes me laugh again." "Who makes me feel again?" "I hope so. I'd like to think she'd approve." "Emma approves," Caleb observed, watching his daughter wait for them at the crosswalk. "That's what really matters." As if she'd heard him, Emma turned and called out, "Can Ava come visit us? Come see our town?" "If she wants to," Caleb called back. "Do you want to?" Emma asked Ava directly. Ava smiled and, "I would love to, if you and your dad will have me." "Of course we will," Emma said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Then she ran back to them and grabbed Ava's hand. "Come on. There's this cool shop I want to show you. They have these crystals that change color in different lights, and I've been saving my allowance to buy one." She dragged Ava toward a store, chattering the whole way. Caleb followed behind, watching them together, and felt his heart expand. This was what possibility looked like, he realized. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and hopeful and full of potential. The day ended too soon. By late afternoon, Emma was tired, and Caleb needed to get back before the roads got too icy. They walked Ava to her car, a rental, since her SUV was still being repaired, and stood in the parking garage saying goodbye. "Thank you," Caleb said, pulling her close. "For today, for being so good with Emma, for giving us a chance. Thank you for bringing her, for trusting me with something so important to you." Ava looked over at Emma, who was practicing cartwheels a polite distance away. "She's amazing, Caleb. You're so lucky." "I know, and I'm lucky to have found you too." They kissed goodbye, brief and chaste because Emma was watching, but it held a promise. This was just the beginning. They had time now to figure things out, to build something real. As Caleb drove home with Emma, his daughter was uncharacteristically quiet. He glanced over at her, worried. "Em, you okay?" "I like her," Emma said finally. "Ava, I like her a lot." Relief flooded through him. "Yeah, what do you like about her?" "She listens, like really listens. And she didn't try too hard to make me like her. She just was herself." Emma fiddled with the zipper on her jacket. "And she makes you smile. You haven't smiled like that since Mommy died." Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. "Is it okay with you, me being with her?" "I think Mommy would want you to be happy, and if Ava makes you happy, then it's okay with me." She looked at him seriously. "But if she ever hurts you, I'll be really mad at her." "Deal." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "I love you, kiddo." "I love you too, Daddy, and I think maybe I could love Ava too. Eventually." Eventually turned out to be sooner than expected. Over the next few weeks, Ava came to visit twice more. She stayed at a bed and breakfast in town, respecting the boundaries Caleb had set about not moving too fast with Emma around. But she spent her days with them, learning about their life, their routines, their world. She helped Emma with her math homework and discovered she enjoyed teaching. She went snowshoeing with them and fell in love with the winter mountains all over again. She sat around the kitchen table playing card games and eating homemade cookies and laughing at Emma's terrible jokes. And slowly, gradually, she became part of their family. By the end of the month, when the insurance settlement came through and Caleb started making decisions about the cabin, Ava was involved in those discussions too. She'd driven up to see the property, walked through the ruins with him, listened as he wrestled with what to do. "I could rebuild it exactly as it was," he said, standing in what used to be the living room. "Same layout, same design, try to recreate what my father built." "But," Ava prompted, "but maybe that's not what I need anymore. Maybe I need something different, something that honors the past but looks toward the future." He turned to her. "What do you think?" "I think you should build what serves your life now, what Emma needs, what you need. The memories don't live in the walls, Caleb. They live in you. In the stories you tell, the traditions you keep. The cabin can be different, and the love can stay the same." It was exactly what he needed to hear. That night, he started sketching ideas for a new design. Something smaller and more efficient, but with room to grow. With a bedroom for Emma, a workshop for his projects, and maybe, possibly, if things kept going the way they were going, space for Ava. 2 days later, Ava called with news. "I did it," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I told the board I'm stepping down as CEO." Caleb's heart stopped. "What?" "I'm staying on as Chief Innovation Officer. Still involved, still contributing, but someone else can run the day-to-day. Someone who actually wants to be in board meetings and deal with investors. I'm going to focus on the work I love, developing new technology, mentoring young engineers, the stuff that actually matters to me." "Ava, that's... wow. How do you feel?" "Terrified, excited, free." She laughed. "And I'm looking at property in Copper Creek. I think it's time I had a place in the mountains." "You're moving here?" "Not full-time. I'll still need to be in Denver for work sometimes. But yes, I want to be where you are, Caleb, where Emma is. I want to build a life that includes you both." Caleb couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was saying. She was upending her entire life for him, for them. It was everything he wanted and more terrifying than he could have imagined. "Say something," Ava said nervously. "Please say something." "Come over," Caleb managed. "Right now, I need to see you." She arrived an hour later, and the moment she stepped out of her car, Caleb pulled her into his arms. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Are you absolutely sure this is what you want?" "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied. "I love you, Caleb Foster. I love Emma. I love the life we could build together. And I'm done running from what I want." He kissed her then, right there in Janet's driveway, pouring 4 years of grief and loneliness and fear into it. And when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he said the words he'd been too scared to say before. "Move in with me. Not right away. We'll take it slow for Emma's sake. But eventually, help me rebuild the cabin into something new, something ours." Ava's eyes filled with tears. "Yes. God, yes." And there, in the cold Colorado winter, with snow beginning to fall and the promise of another storm on the horizon, Caleb Foster finally let himself believe in the future again. 3 months later, spring began its tentative arrival in the Colorado Rockies. The snow that had buried everything during the blizzard melted in patches, revealing brown grass and the promise of green underneath. The cabin reconstruction was underway, the sound of hammers and saws filling the mountain air as contractors worked to bring Caleb's new design to life. Ava stood in what would become the kitchen, watching sunlight stream through the new windows. The space was bigger than the original, more open, with views of the mountains that took her breath away every time she looked. She'd been here almost every weekend since Caleb had asked her to help rebuild, contributing ideas, making decisions, slowly claiming space in this new life they were building together. "What do you think?" Caleb came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Too much light? Not enough?" "It's perfect." She leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body. "Everything about this place is perfect." "Not everything. The master bedroom still needs work, and the deck railing is giving the contractors fits." But she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. This cabin was becoming everything he'd hoped, a bridge between past and future, a home that honored what he'd lost while embracing what he'd found. Emma's voice carried from outside, where she was helping Janet plant early spring flowers in the garden beds they'd built. "Grandma, do you think Ava would like purple flowers or yellow ones better?" "Why don't you ask her?" Janet called back. Seconds later, Emma burst through the doorway, muddy and grinning. "Ava, come see. We're planting flowers, and I want your opinion on colors." Ava felt her heart swell the way it did every time Emma included her, every time this fierce, brilliant child made space for her in their family. "Let me grab my boots." She followed Emma outside, leaving Caleb to discuss structural details with the lead contractor. The afternoon sun was warm despite the lingering chill in the air, and the smell of damp earth filled her lungs. Janet was kneeling by a flower bed, trowel in hand, looking healthier than she had in months. The winter had been hard on her. Worry over Caleb during the storm. Worry over Emma. Worry over what this new relationship would mean for her late daughter's family. But gradually, as Janet watched Ava with Emma and Caleb, her concerns had eased. Just last week, she'd pulled Ava aside and said quietly, "Sarah would have liked you, would have appreciated how you loved them." It was the greatest compliment Ava had ever received. "Purple or yellow?" Emma asked now, holding up 2 different seed packets. "Why not both?" Ava suggested. "We could do purple along the edge and yellow in the middle, create a pattern." "Like a sunset!" Emma's face lit up. "That's perfect. Grandma, can we do that?" "We can do whatever you want, sweet pea." Janet smiled at Ava over Emma's head, a look of approval and acceptance that made Ava's eyes prick with tears. They spent the next hour planting, their hands deep in soil, Emma chattering about everything and nothing. She'd grown comfortable with Ava over the past months, the initial wariness transforming into genuine affection. She still talked to Sarah's photo every night, still kept her mother's memory alive, but she'd made room for Ava too, in her own way, on her own timeline. "Ava?" Emma asked suddenly. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you going to marry my dad?" Janet's hand stilled on the trowel. Ava felt her breath catch, unprepared for the directness of the question. We haven't talked about that, Em. But do you want to? Did she? Marriage hadn't even entered her mind in concrete terms. She'd been so focused on building this relationship day by day, on not rushing, on letting things develop naturally. But hearing Emma ask it so plainly made her examine her own heart. Yeah, she said softly. Yeah, I think I do. Someday. If your dad wants that too. Emma nodded seriously, processing this. Okay, that's good, because I think you should be part of our family for real, not just visiting. She's already part of our family, Emma, Janet said gently. She has been for a while now. A piece of paper doesn't change that. But it makes it official, like permanent. Emma looked at Ava with Sarah's gray eyes. I don't want you to leave. Ava set down her trowel and pulled Emma into a hug, not caring about the dirt on either of them. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart, I promise. This is my home now. You and your dad. You're my home. She felt Emma relax against her, and when the girl pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. Happy tears. Good, because I love you. Is that okay? Is it okay that I love you even though I love Mommy too? Oh, Emma. Ava's own tears spilled over. Of course it's okay. Love doesn't work like that. Loving me doesn't mean you love your mom any less. Your heart is big enough for both of us. That's what Daddy says. Your daddy's a smart man. They finished planting as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. When they were done, the flower bed looked like exactly what Emma had envisioned, a sunset captured in purple and yellow, something beautiful growing from dark earth. Caleb found them washing up at the outdoor spigot, all three of them muddy and laughing. What did I miss? Girl talk, Janet said mysteriously, shooting Ava a knowing look. Nothing for you to worry about. But Emma, unable to keep secrets, blurted out, I asked Ava if she's going to marry you, and she said she wants to someday. And I said, that's good because I want her to be permanent. Caleb's eyes went wide, darting between his daughter and Ava. What? Emma! Ava felt her face flame. You can't just Why not? It's true, isn't it? Emma looked between them, confused by their reactions. You love each other. People who love each other get married. That's how it works. Out of the mouths of babes, Janet murmured, clearly trying not to laugh. Emma, why don't you help me carry these tools back to the shed? Give your father and Ava a moment to talk. But I want to... Now, Emma. Emma sighed dramatically, but followed her grandmother, throwing one last look over her shoulder at Caleb and Ava standing frozen by the spigot. The moment they were alone, Caleb said, I'm sorry. She shouldn't have put you on the spot like that. She didn't. Not really. Ava wiped her muddy hands on her jeans. She asked a fair question, and I answered honestly. That you want to marry me someday? Is that so surprising? Yes. No. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of dirt. We've never talked about it. I didn't want to assume, didn't want to push. You've already changed your whole life for me, your job, where you live. I didn't want to ask for more. What if I want to give more? Ava stepped closer, took his dirty hands in hers. What if I want everything, Caleb? The whole future, messy and complicated and beautiful? He stared at her, something vulnerable and hopeful warring in his expression. Are you sure? Really sure? Because if we do this, if we make it permanent like Emma said, there's no going back. You'd be taking on both of us, me and Emma and all our baggage. The ghost of Sarah will always be here. I'll always be a small-town mechanic with dirt under his nails. We'll never have the life you had before. Good, Ava said it fiercely. I don't want the life I had before. That life was empty. This, you, Emma, this cabin, these mountains, this is real. This is what matters. You make it sound simple. It is simple. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just details we figure out as we go. She paused. Unless you don't want to marry me. That's okay too. We can keep things as they are. I just need you to know that I'm all in, whatever that looks like. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. Then he said, I bought a ring 2 weeks ago. Ava's breath caught. What? I bought a ring. It's in my truck, in the glove compartment. I've been carrying it around trying to figure out the right time to ask, the right way to do it. I wanted it to be perfect, wanted to plan something special, but Emma just... He laughed shakily. Emma just blew right past all my careful planning. Can I see it? He led her to his truck, parked by the construction area. Pulled out a small velvet box from the glove compartment. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond set in white gold. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, exactly what she would have chosen for herself. It was my grandmother's, Caleb said quietly. My father gave it to her when they got married, and she left it to me when she died. I know it's not expensive or fancy like you're probably used to. It's perfect, Ava interrupted, tears streaming down her face. It's absolutely perfect. So, is this a proposal? I feel like I should be on one knee or something. I should have practiced a speech. He was fumbling, nervous, so different from his usual steady competence that it made her love him even more. Caleb Foster, she said, framing his face with her muddy hands. Will you marry me? He laughed, surprised. I'm supposed to be asking you. Too slow. I'm asking you. Will you marry me? Will you let me be Emma's stepmother and your wife and part of this crazy, beautiful life you're building? Yes. He pulled her close, kissed her with a desperation that spoke of how scared he'd been to hope for this. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. They were both crying now, both laughing, both covered in dirt and sweat and happiness. Caleb slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her, and she stared at it in wonder. This symbol of commitment, of choosing each other despite everything that stood between them. Can I tell Emma? Emma's voice came from behind them, making them both jump. She was peering around the corner of the truck, Janet visible behind her, trying to look stern but failing. Emma Grace Foster, were you spying? Caleb tried to sound serious but couldn't quite manage it. Maybe, but I wanted to know. So can I tell people? Can I tell my friends at school that you're getting married? Yes, Ava said, laughing. You can tell whoever you want. Emma whooped and took off running toward the construction workers, shouting, They're getting married! Ava said yes! The workers, who'd been pretending not to watch the drama unfold, broke into applause and whistles. Janet came over to hug them both, tears in her eyes. Congratulations, she said warmly. Sarah would be so happy for you both. So happy that you found each other. The words should have felt heavy with obligation or comparison, but they didn't. They felt like a blessing, like permission from the past to fully embrace the future. The next few weeks passed in a blur of joy and planning. They decided on a small ceremony at the cabin once construction was complete. Just family and close friends, nothing elaborate. Emma appointed herself wedding planner and threw herself into the role with characteristic enthusiasm, creating binders full of ideas and making lists of everything that needed to be done. Ava split her time between Denver and the mountains, gradually transitioning her work responsibilities so she could be remote more often. Her new role as Chief Innovation Officer gave her flexibility she'd never had as CEO, and she discovered she loved the freedom. Loved being able to focus on the creative aspects of technology development without the burden of running a company. Marcus, her assistant, took the news of her engagement with surprising warmth. About time, he'd said when she showed him the ring. I was beginning to think you'd never let yourself be happy. You approve? Ava, I've worked for you for 7 years. I've never seen you smile the way you smile when you talk about him. So yes, I approve. He'd paused. For what it's worth, David would have approved too. He always said you worked too hard, that you needed someone to remind you there was life outside the office. The mention of her brother still hurt, but it was a gentler pain now. She'd been visiting his grave more often, talking to him the way Emma talked to Sarah's photo, telling him about Caleb and Emma, about the cabin and the mountains, about how she'd finally found what she'd been running from all these years: connection, purpose, love. In May, Ava attended the company's IPO ceremony. She stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and watched Sinclair Technologies become a public company, watched the stock price climb, watched investors celebrate. It should have been the culmination of everything she and David had worked for. Instead, it felt distant, like watching someone else's triumph. The real victory was what came after. She donated a significant portion of her shares to establish the David Sinclair Innovation Fund, providing grants for young engineers and entrepreneurs. She set up college funds for Emma and Caleb. She paid off the mortgage on Janet's house. And then she walked away from the celebration, caught a flight back to Denver, and drove straight to the mountains. She arrived after midnight, exhausted from travel. The cabin was dark except for a single light Caleb had left on for her. She let herself in quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. But Caleb was waiting up in the kitchen, a mug of tea going cold on the table. He stood when he saw her, and she walked straight into his arms. "How was it?" he asked, holding her tight. Surreal, like it happened to someone else. She breathed him in, sawdust and soap and home. "I'm glad it's done. Glad I can close that chapter and focus on this one." "Any regrets?" She pulled back to look at him. "Not a single one. Everything I need is right here." They stood in the kitchen of the half-finished cabin, holding each other in the darkness, and Ava felt a peace she'd never known before. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not success or achievement or recognition, but simply this: being held, being known, being loved. The wedding took place on a perfect June day with the mountains as their cathedral and wildflowers carpeting the meadow. The cabin was finished enough to use, though still smelled of fresh paint and lumber. They'd kept it simple. 30 guests, all people who mattered. Emma stood as Ava's maid of honor, solemn and beautiful in a purple dress that matched the flowers they'd planted together. Janet cried through the entire ceremony. Even some of the construction workers showed up, these men who'd become invested in the love story they'd watched unfold. Caleb's father's best friend, a retired search and rescue captain who'd known him since childhood, officiated. He spoke about how Caleb's father had believed everyone deserved to get home, and how Caleb had inherited that same commitment to helping people find their way. "But sometimes," the captain said, looking between Caleb and Ava, "sometimes home isn't a place. Sometimes it's a person." And these two found home in each other in the middle of the worst storm these mountains have seen in years. If that's not fate, I don't know what is. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Caleb promised to always see her, to always give her space to be herself, to love her through the complicated and the messy. Ava promised to always choose him, to always make space for Emma, to build a life that honored the past while embracing the future. When they kissed, Emma cheered loudest of all. The reception was held in the new great room, with music from a local bluegrass band and food from every restaurant in Copper Creek. It was loud and joyful, and nothing like the elegant corporate events Ava used to attend. It was perfect. Late in the evening, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Emma found Ava standing on the new deck watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "Hey," Emma said, slipping her hand into Ava's. "Can I call you Mom now, or is that weird?" Ava's throat closed with emotion. "You can call me whatever you're comfortable with, sweetheart. Mom, Ava, whatever feels right." "I think Mom feels right. But maybe Mom Ava? So it's different from my first mom?" Emma looked up at her uncertainly. "I don't want to forget her. I don't want to replace her." "You're not replacing her. You're just making room for both of us." Ava knelt down so they were eye level. "Your mom will always be your mom. Nothing changes that. I'm just additional, bonus mom." Emma giggled at that. "Bonus mom. I like it." She threw her arms around Ava's neck. "I love you, bonus mom." "I love you too, Emma. So much." Caleb found them like that, locked in a hug on the deck, and joined them. The three of them stood together watching the light fade from the sky, wrapped in each other and the promise of all the days to come. That night, after Emma was asleep in her new bedroom and the last guest had gone, Caleb and Ava stood in their bedroom together, and looked out at the mountains silver with moonlight. "Do you ever think about the storm?" Ava asked. "About how we met?" "Every day." Caleb pulled her close, his hands settling at her waist. "I think about finding you in that car. Think about how close I came to driving past, to not stopping. One different decision, and none of this would exist." "Fate," Ava said. "The captain was right. It was fate." "Maybe. Or maybe it was choice. Maybe the universe gave us an opportunity and we chose to take it. chose to trust each other, to take risks, to believe in possibility. He turned her to face him. I choose you, Ava Foster. Every day for the rest of my life, I choose you. And I choose you. Choose this life, this family, this home we're building together. She kissed him softly. Thank you for saving me, for showing me what life could be. You saved me too, Caleb said. You saved me from just surviving, taught me how to live again. They made love that night in their new bedroom, in the cabin rebuilt from ruins, under the watchful eye of the mountains that had brought them together. And afterward, tangled in sheets and each other, Ava felt something she'd never quite managed before. Absolute contentment. Absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The months that followed were filled with the ordinary magic of building a life together. Ava set up a home office in the cabin where she could work remotely, going into Denver once or twice a week for meetings. She discovered she loved the rhythm of mountain life, the slower pace, the connection to seasons and weather, the community of people who looked out for each other. She became involved in Emma's school, joining the PTA and helping with science fair projects. She learned to ski properly, not just survive the slopes, and discovered a passion for it. She started hiking with Caleb on weekends, learning the trails he'd grown up on, seeing the mountains through his eyes. And slowly, gradually, she let go of the person she'd been before. CEO Ava, with her armor and her ambition and her need to control everything, faded away. In her place emerged someone softer, but no less strong, someone who knew her worth wasn't measured in quarterly earnings or market share, but in moments. Emma's laugh, Caleb's smile, the satisfaction of a day well lived. By autumn, when the aspens turned gold and the air held the first hint of winter, Ava stood in the meadow where they'd been married and realized she couldn't remember exactly when this had stopped feeling like a new life and started feeling like simply her life. The transition had been so gradual, so natural, that she hadn't noticed it happening. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked, coming up behind her. They'd taken to evening walks after dinner, just the two of them while Emma did homework. How much has changed in a year? How different everything is from what I planned. Better or worse? So much better. Impossibly better. She leaned back against him. A year ago, I was driving through a blizzard trying to run away from my life. Now I'm running toward it instead. Toward you, toward Emma, toward all of this. No regrets? Not one. You? He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. For 4 years after Sarah died, I was frozen, locked in grief, unable to move forward or even imagine wanting to. And then you crashed into my life, literally crashed, and everything changed. You reminded me that my heart was still beating, still capable of love, that I deserved more than just surviving. He turned her in his arms. So no regrets, only gratitude that the universe was crazy enough to throw us together. They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire. And Ava thought about the journey that had brought her here, the wrong turns and the losses, the ambition that had consumed her and the emptiness it had left behind. All of it had been necessary to bring her to this moment, this man, this life. That night, over dinner, Emma announced she was doing a project for school about family history. We have to interview our parents about how they met and write a story about it. So how did you guys meet? Caleb and Ava exchanged glances, both smiling. Your bonus mom crashed her car in a blizzard, Caleb said. And your dad saved my life, Ava added. That's it? That's not very romantic. Emma frowned, clearly hoping for something more dramatic. Oh, there's more, Ava assured her. A lot more. There was a destroyed cabin and freezing cold and your dad carrying me through a snowstorm. There was fear and hope, and the scariest moment of my life followed by the best decision I ever made. What decision? To trust your father, to let him take care of me, to open my heart even though I was terrified. Ava reached across the table to take Caleb's hand. To choose love over fear. Emma wrote it all down, her pencil flying across the page. And later, when Ava read the essay Emma had written for school, she found herself crying at how her stepdaughter had captured the essence of their story. My bonus mom says that sometimes the worst storms bring us exactly where we need to be, Emma had written. She says that her car crash was the best thing that ever happened to her because it brought her to us. My dad says that saving her saved him too. I think that's what love is. When saving someone else helps you save yourself. When two broken people find each other and make something whole. The essay got an A, and the teacher added a note at the bottom. What a beautiful love story. Your family is lucky to have each other. Winter came again, as it always did in the mountains. But this year, Ava wasn't afraid of it. She'd learned that storms passed, that cold was temporary, that spring always followed winter no matter how harsh it seemed. On the anniversary of the blizzard that had brought them together, Caleb surprised her with a gift. It was a painting, commissioned from a local artist, of the old cabin in the snow. Not destroyed, but as it had been before the storm, strong and weathered and full of history. I wanted you to see it the way I remember it, he said, before it fell, when it was still my father's place, still connected to all those memories. It's beautiful. But look at the title. She looked at the small plaque on the frame. It read, "The Place Where Our Story Began." Because that's what it was, Caleb continued. The storm destroyed the cabin, but it gave us each other. It ended one chapter and started another. And I wouldn't change a single thing about how it happened. They hung the painting in the great room, where it joined the photos of Sarah and Caleb's father, where it became part of the tapestry of their blended family. Past and present, loss and love, all existing together in the same space. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the wind outside, a gentler wind than the one that had brought them together, but wind nonetheless, Ava said, "I want to tell you something." "What's that?" "I'm pregnant." Caleb went very still. "You're... what?" "Pregnant. About 8 weeks. I found out yesterday, but I wanted to wait until today to tell you. Our anniversary seemed like the right time." She turned to face him, trying to read his expression in the darkness. "Are you happy? I know we didn't plan this. No, Emma's getting older, and you probably weren't thinking about starting over with a baby." He kissed her, cutting off her worried rambling. "I'm ecstatic. Terrified, but ecstatic." "Does Emma know?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first, but Caleb, I'm scared. I don't know anything about babies. I've never even held one. What if I'm terrible at this?" "You won't be. You're amazing with Emma, and you'll be amazing with this baby, and I'll be right here with you every step of the way." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby?" she repeated, and suddenly it felt real. Not scary, but miraculous. This new life growing inside her, created from love and trust and everything they'd built together. They told Emma the next morning over pancakes. She stared at them for a long moment, processing. Then she said, "So I'm going to be a big sister?" "Yes," Ava confirmed. "What do you think about that?" Emma was quiet, thinking. Then a huge grin spread across her face. "I think it's awesome. I've always wanted a sibling. Can we find out if it's a boy or girl? Can I help pick names? Can I teach it things?" "Yes to all of that," Caleb said, laughing. "You're going to be the best big sister ever." "I know," Emma said confidently. "I've been practicing with my friends' little brothers and sisters. I'm really good at it." The pregnancy brought them even closer as a family. Emma took her role as big sister in training seriously, reading books about babies and making lists of everything they'd need. Janet was thrilled, already knitting blankets and planning to help once the baby arrived. Even Marcus sent a gift basket from Denver with a note. "Congratulations on your continued adventures and complete life transformation." Ava worked from home more as her pregnancy progressed, grateful for the flexibility her new role provided. She video conferenced into meetings, managed projects remotely, and discovered she could be just as effective, maybe more effective, without being physically present in an office every day. She also spent more time with the community in Copper Creek, these people who'd welcomed her without question despite her outsider status. She joined a book club with other mothers, went to town council meetings with Caleb, volunteered at Emma's school. She became woven into the fabric of this place, not as a CEO or an outsider, but as simply Ava, Caleb's wife, Emma's bonus mom, a neighbor and friend. In May, as the wildflowers began to bloom again in the meadow where they'd been married, Ava went into labor. It was fast, much faster than anyone expected for a first baby, and they barely made it to the hospital in time. Sarah Elizabeth Foster was born at dawn on a Sunday morning, weighing 7 pounds 3 ounces, with her mother's dark hair and her father's steady gaze. Emma got to meet her sister an hour after she was born and promptly burst into tears. "She's so tiny," Emma whispered, carefully touching the baby's hand. "And perfect." "Just like you were," Caleb said, his arm around Emma's shoulders. "When you were born, I thought you were the most perfect thing I'd ever seen. Now we have 2 perfect daughters." They named her after Sarah and Ava's grandmother Elizabeth, honoring both the past and the present. And when they brought her home to the cabin, Janet was waiting with food and flowers and tears of joy. "Sarah would have loved this," Janet said, holding her new granddaughter. "Would have loved seeing you all together, seeing the family grow. She'd be so happy." That night, after everyone had gone and the baby was asleep in her bassinet, Caleb and Ava stood in the nursery watching her breathe. The room was painted a soft yellow, filled with handmade quilts and wooden toys Caleb had crafted. Through the window, they could see the mountains dark against the star-filled sky. "Can you believe this is our life?" Ava asked quietly. 2 years ago, I was alone in a penthouse apartment working myself to death. Now I'm here, with you and Emma and this perfect little human we made together." "It's pretty incredible," Caleb agreed. "Sometimes I wake up and think I'm going to find it was all a dream, that I'll be back in the old cabin, alone, still trapped in grief." "It's not a dream." Ava leaned against him. "It's real. This is real. We built this together." "We did." He kissed the top of her head. "And we're going to keep building it. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love at a time." The months that followed were exhausting and beautiful in equal measure. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, Emma's careful help and Janet's steady support, Caleb's competence with the baby that spoke of experience Ava lacked, but was learning. They moved through those early weeks as a team, supporting each other, figuring it out together. By autumn, little Sarah, they'd started calling her Sally to distinguish her from her namesake, was sitting up and laughing. Emma doted on her, reading her stories and singing her songs. Ava had returned to work part-time, balancing conference calls with nursing sessions, learning to navigate the impossible dance of career and motherhood. She was different now than she'd been as a CEO. More patient, less driven by metrics and deadlines. She still cared about her work, still contributed meaningful innovations to Sinclair Technologies, but it wasn't her whole identity anymore. It was just one part of a full, complicated, beautiful life. On the 2nd anniversary of the blizzard, they threw a party at the cabin. The same guests who'd come to their wedding returned, along with new friends they'd made. Emma had invited her entire class, and the house was full of noise and laughter and life. Tommy Richardson, his furnace still running thanks to Caleb's repair that fateful night, cornered Ava in the kitchen. "You know, if you hadn't crashed your car, none of this would exist. That storm brought you 2 together." "It did," Ava agreed. "Best accident of my life." "Not an accident," Tommy said wisely. "Fate. The mountain knew what it was doing." Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Caleb found Ava on the deck holding Sally, Emma beside her pointing out constellations. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching his family, feeling gratitude so intense it was almost painful. This was what his father had meant, he realized. This feeling of completeness, of rightness. Everyone deserves to get home. And home wasn't a building or a place. Home was this. These people, these moments, this love. "Come here, Dad," Emma called. "Come see the Big Dipper." He joined them, wrapping his arms around all 3 of his girls. Sally gurgled happily. Emma leaned against his side, and Ava turned her face up for a kiss. They stood together under the vast Colorado sky, under the stars that had witnessed their beginning and would witness all their tomorrows. "I love you," Caleb said to all of them. "My whole family, my whole heart." "We love you too," Ava replied, and Emma echoed, "Love you, Dad." 3 years had passed since that blizzard, since Caleb had pulled a stranger from a wrecked car and both their lives had changed forever. 3 years of building and growing and learning to trust and love again. 3 years of proving that sometimes the worst storms bring us exactly where we need to be. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Winter was coming again, as it always did in the mountains. But Caleb wasn't afraid of it anymore. None of them were. They'd weathered worse storms than anything the mountain could throw at them. They'd survived the cold and the dark and come out stronger on the other side. Because they'd learned what really mattered. Not success or achievement or control, but this: connection, family, love. The courage to open your heart even when it's been broken. The willingness to trust even when you're terrified. The choice to keep choosing each other day after day, storm after storm. Everyone deserves to get home, Caleb's father had always said. And standing there with his family under the stars, Caleb finally understood the full truth of those words. Home wasn't just a destination. It was a journey you took with the people you loved. It was the choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving even when it was hard. And he and Ava had made it home, together. Against all odds, through blizzard and loss and fear, they'd found their way to each other and built something beautiful from the ruins. As snow began to fall, soft and gentle, nothing like the storm that had brought them together, Caleb pulled his family closer. They stood together in the falling snow, safe and warm and whole, and watched the mountains embrace the winter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new storms to weather. But tonight, they had this. They had each other. They had love. And that, Caleb thought as he held his family close, was more than enough. That was everything.